They said.
Yeah. All good things.
What good it is.
Oh.
We're all coughing and hacking. That's fun. So guys,
You're gonna have to do most of the talking.
last class left us all like. And that means you all drove home or turned off your computer. And had stuff going through your brain. Take a minute to go back there and bring it back, and let's go back there and talk about what went through your brain as you were debriefing, because that was just a very interesting class. Because you guys are just like on fire. And we do have Shelly coming, right?
Shelly Bartow, who's the executive director at Delaware Opportunity, should be joining us in 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that.
And one of the things I've learned about the Delaware Opportunities. So every county, this is federal money, make sure I'm right, Ray. Every county has a community action operation of some type. So in Ulster County, it's called RUPCO. Yeah,
Oh, are they the organization for that?
which I didn't know until just the other day.
You have,
Because I Googled it for another purpose. I'm still curious about housing, workforce housing. So I Googled it and it says it right there. And then I went to Delaware Opportunities, it said, your community action agency.
yeah.
So it's
Opportunity
Rocco,
for
and of course,
us to
Joan-
go is Another,
My sister worked for them for
Right.
what, a decade?
yeah.
So, what did you think? What did you drive away or turn off your computer and think about in terms of your learning and what you'd like to accomplish here? Because we have to get serious about considering projects. Or is everybody in pre-Thanksgiving fog?
What was it? Just the conversation
Just,
from last
yeah,
class?
what do you remember? Where does your brain go? We're gonna have to get serious today about thinking about your projects. And so we wanted to kind of open up with that, and then afterwards, we're gonna talk about the power and curse of timelines. When you go to set a timeline because you think I'm gonna accomplish this, and then all of a sudden you start looking at reality.
There's much more faith in your future self.
Yeah. It really does influence the shaping of your decisions. So where are you?
In our last class, it was just really apparent that this area wants more connection as a more community basis in our professional areas and our personal areas. We want more support, whether that be with childcare or just friendships in professional areas or not. But I think there's just a big need for that. And maybe that's just post-COVID kind of thing, like people were missing that connection, so now they're just craving it. But that's just what I got from our last conversation, that it's a big, people want it, we want it all.
Anybody else? We're patient. We give space.
Kind of thought the same thing, kind of more on the professional side, though. I think the housing and childcare, that's always been something that I think has been necessary and needed in the area, but I was thinking of like what we're doing here now, speaking with you all and doing this process and kind of shortening that gap between generations and all of that kind of stuff, and that's something that I just find really exciting. I think that's something that professionally can help the existing workforce and maybe attract more of a substantive workforce, talented workforce. I don't want to say it crudely, but you know what I mean? Like
Well,
professional development, whatever.
I don't think that's, there's, you know, you take what Caitlin said about craving. You recognize that that was always there, but post-COVID, it's more intense. You look at workforce housing issues, which were always there, post-COVID, they're more intense, right? So we have to attract not just the workforce, but the right.
And by the way, the unemployment numbers came out about an hour ago, and for the month of October, Delaware County is at 2.5%.
Wow.
Otsego County is at 2.1.
Mm.
Sullivan is at 2.3. 2.2, something like that. So
But I always like to follow that with, and this is all good news.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I want to remind everybody that there are still a boatload of people out there working multiple jobs.
Right.
You can't forget that.
So what does that look like?
That connection, that,
That connection, I think it's in programs like this. I think it's, I don't know if it's always mixers, because I think mixers are good for certain aspects, but there's maybe a more targeted communication piece to it, right? Whether it's a forum or I don't know how you facilitate that, but bringing, you can put so many people in a room at a time and the conversation can only go so far, but adding kind of a goal or a target with a certain group, kind of like what we're doing here, but maybe less formalized or less.
or less regular.
Right, that's the word.
Okay, because where you started talking and you said panel or forum, my brain went to a panel,
Mhm.
okay? When you bring people together, if you have a panel around a topic, and the goal is that each of the panelists has something different to offer, which allows for you to have, you have a diverse panel, you have diverse needs in the audience. But what happens, and I have several examples of this in my experience, is that perspective A speaks, perspective B speaks, perspective C speaks, and D, and they all cover a different piece from their perspective, and maybe you call it perspectives. Because then this person over here has a question for A. But when that dialogue is heard by somebody else here who has a question for C, and they ask their question, all of a sudden you get cross-pollination or interconnection between the perspectives, which is a foundation builder. So that's where my brain went when you said that. I saw panels on different really cool topics with something cool to do with the I don't know, but I was struggling with workforce preparation, so we decided to say, let's get some people together to be a panel, and we invited not just parents, not just businesses, not just teachers, not just kids, but all of them together. And I watched it, and there were 6 panelists. And the question, it was a simple question. Everybody was asked to speak from their perspective on the question, what do employers and businesses need for the future? And they each spoke, and I watched what happened, because when the meeting ended, nobody left. They were all going to that person over there. They heard say something interesting, and that person over there. So there's connection, and then there's the interconnection. And that builds networks.
But how does that help? What you just talked about, Caitlin?
The connection. I think hearing all of those things, people being present, you just have to get people to be present. I think that works in a professional setting. I don't know,
Somebody else,
yeah,
jump in. We want to attract. We want to support.
I think the support thing is important
Yeah.
for what we're kind of talking about, in, like, the support varies, obviously,
Mhm.
but looking for that. Culture of community support, so if you're talking about different businesses and different professionals, them working together. And seeing that they can work together. And offer those perspectives. Only can help them, really. I think in small towns, especially, you can get a lot of. That competitive mindset that still kind of exists, that exists all over the world, but in small towns, I think it's more important to say. We all want to thrive in this small area together, so. Doing these things together and offering our perspectives freely and without trade or without. Without any other. Type of reciprocation, but just to help the betterment of the area. But that's just, I think that's a boundary that you have to work to get across. I don't know if that's gonna be.
No,
The one discussion, that's an ongoing.
Like a white mentorship program? Or like that kind of thing?
That's
Right.
why I'm
It's like,
sitting here.
Yeah.
waiting.
Mr. Miyagi, but different, because there's, I mean, I'll say from our community, just growing up there, like knowing the common players, right? The Glenn Faulkners and the Peg Ellsworths and all of the community members who have been doing things for so long.
And
seeing-
cultivating the ones that are under the radar and less visible.
Yeah.
Right,
There's,
and there's.
our region has some real superstars.
Right, and there's a, like a stirring of all of these people that are doing all of these things. And commonly people that are doing some of that work just want to kind of lay low, do their piece and go on, but kind of like highlighting some of that work and showing why and how and what they do and what the programs actually are. That they assist with, or the areas of need that we're seeing that can get connected with that, right? So it's a childcare thing or a networking thing or a space for people to make those bonds. Or relationships that, so I know if I need something over at Wayne Bank, I have contact at least to
Mhm.
make a phone call and say, hey, I'm looking to do X, Y, Z. Can you point me in the right direction?
And how do you share that with your colleagues and your community? So
Right. And what's appropriate to share too. I think there's a little bit there also.
And what is to share? So when I hear to share, my brain says, okay, sharing is giving. We don't want to just give. We want to invite.
Almost like equip too, right?
Say that again?
Almost like an equipping also, like this is a this is a how to.
And that comes through sharing. Now, Ray, you jumped on internship.
Mentorship.
Or mentorship. Do you, so as soon as I heard that, I said, one-to-one mentorship is a lot,
Right.
but team mentorship happen if we got some real kick-ass Delaware County leaders, the overt ones and the covert ones together and said, we want to raise 3 important questions and have 3 sessions designed to better equip the future leaders of the region.
But is that making the connection that you are talking about?
Start to it.
Hmm?
I think it's a start to it.
Depends on how you set it up.
Yeah, I think it's the medium in which you do it. So maybe a panel might be the easiest way to facilitate it, but it might not be the most well received way to.
And there's
Right,
a role for a panel,
you know,
there's a role for another format. And there's a role for another format. So maybe,
Sorry, I
Go
can,
ahead.
like you said, a panel and breaking it off into sub-panels and different categories, that would benefit. I can just see it branching out more.
Yeah.
I mean, here's one, you have a panel, you have a lot of discussion. And then you give them all stickies and have them provide input. Or questions, things I'm passionate about this one. And you go put your name on a sticky on that board, or I'm passionate about this one. And maybe we're gonna have a roll up your sleeves, we're gonna bring some new people in. Maybe there's a social event associated with it where everybody's tasked to bring a friend. I don't know, right? I love saying that because.
and I
it
see
means-
these, like the smaller groups like we're in, like we're able to bounce these ideas off of each other and like kind of build off of this. And then that, to your point, Kim, I don't know how you facilitate those smaller groups, and maybe they're more frequent, but smaller groups might be
What's
a better
gonna,
way, right?
what is going to encourage participation?
Yeah. Can't do these things
Because
if nobody's
right
gonna follow
now, you know, I'm thinking, okay, you have this panel, you got breakout sessions. Oh.
Yeah.
I can't see one event, that's the thing. They need to see a package deal.
Well, let me tell you what's skewing my thinking at the moment. Remember a couple sessions ago, I talked about the Appalachian Regional Commission.
Can you hear us? Are we loud enough?
And the work that ARC does. DCMO BOCES, Delaware, Shenango, Madison, Otsego BOCES. Recently, very recently, received a grant from ARC for a mentoring program. And it's being facilitated, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but centered, if you will, currently at DCMO BOCES, and involves the 3 county chambers in that service, so Shenango, Otsego, and Delaware. And what we hope to do, the groundwork for that grant was in part surveys of existing students at BOCES, asking the questions. First, you're a senior, are you planning on sticking around? Hey, come on in.
How are you?
You're a senior, are
impressive.
you planning on sticking around? And of course, the overwhelming
Oh,
majority,
that way you can see.
Okay.
the overwhelming majority said absolutely not. Then the question was, okay, so if that's the case, what would encourage you to stay? And what the students, what we learned from that was that students said, first, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what's available. We don't know what's happening locally. And 2, we don't have the connections. We need to be able to connect to someone in the community. We need to connect on a professional level or something
Personal
like that.
professional. It's a,
Personal, professional.
Yeah, we try to go down the
Someone who can not guide us or steer us, but that we feel some connection, and through that was developed this idea of this mentoring program, which will launch in January. And through that, on our 3-county region, we hope to connect at least 60 students with a mentor. The ones that we'll be doing here will be folks who are, I think, currently employed, currently engaged in the community. I don't, as I'm getting closer and closer to that age, I certainly don't want to downplay the idea of retirees, but I don't see a 17-year-old connecting real well with a 70-year-old. So I'm certainly, my mentors are going to be skewing much younger. And if any of you want to be one of those, tell me. But and it's all going to be done online, and it's 3 or 4 half-hour sessions over a 2-month period, and we'll see where that goes
yeah, it's very exciting.
from there.
And
But maybe that's something that can be applied to what I've been told I'm gonna have a platform that I can
okay.
use for mentoring.
So this
So-
is a good time for them to go on hold and really learn a lot about what's out there on some areas that you've already raised a lot of questions about. And then we're gonna circle back to this because you're gonna get fueled by some new conversation, maybe generating some new ideas. And before we start, I think we need to make sure we introduce ourselves. So I'm Diane Monroe, retired, but not really. Currently the principal in Margaretville.
Your son was telling me that you accepted that position briefly on a Zoom interview.
It's hysterical because, I'm retired and again, it's a curse. I have to be helpful. This world is insane. I have to be helpful if I can, rather than say somebody's gonna be something. It's my curse, but it's actually, I use the word renaissance and I call it the post-COVID renaissance. And that's really what you're talking about here. That's what is happening in that school district, and with some new leadership and new blood, it's very exciting right now. So could you guys introduce you, and then of course we can just let her step right in. And we can get to her.
Hi, Shelly.
Hi.
Caitlin Jones, events
Hi.
coordinator at Delaware.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Hi, Shelly. Tanya Vanetta, Regional Manager for Delaware and Otsego County of Wayne Bank. Nice to meet you. You too. Wait, what did you say your first name was? Tanya. Okay.
Jordan, I'm the youth programs coordinator for Delaware County Catholic Charities.
Awesome. Cambria Tolman, I'm the executive assistant at Bartow Company. I think we've spoken on the phone.
I think so
before.
too.
I'm Jake Johnson, and I also work at Myrtle Telephone Company. I am the business services advisor.
Oh, nice to meet you all.
And this is Shelly Bartow. Oh, and Beth, I'm sorry.
You're fine. I'm Beth Generino. I work at the Roscoe Nursing Home on medical records.
Awesome. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Diverse crew here.
And this is Shelly Bartow, one of my favorite people here in Delaware County. Shelly leads as the executive director at Delaware Opportunities, and without embarrassing her too much, as I've told Shelly before, she and her team work on the side of the angels. And we have Shelly and I have partnered on a few projects over the last few years, and when my experience is that when Shelly says it's this, it's this. No surprises. So with that,
Well,
thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. One of my favorite projects we partner on is Toys for Tots.
Yay,
So I'm gonna put it up for that. These guys do the heavy lifting of
literally the
working
thing.
to get donations, and then my team puts together stuff to distribute to the families that sign up. So it's a great collaborative effort that happens, and I don't even know that people even realize that we're, but anyway, it's great, and it's nice to work with Ray on.
And we have over 30 collection points this year. Throughout the county, including you guys.
Well, and I will just mention something else. Toys for Tots technically only serves children that are up to the age of 12. However, we don't ever turn requests away for teenagers. I find it hard to pack a bag of toys for a family and leave out a kid or two. So we do our best to still accommodate, and whatever doesn't get collected, we collect donations, and wherever we fall short, our agency puts in the difference. So it's definitely a truly collaborative effort, but we can't do it without the donations from the community. So it's great. So let me just tell you a little bit about Delaware Opportunities, and then Ray had asked me specifically to talk about childcare. But I certainly am open to fielding whatever questions that you might have about other things that we
I'll
provide.
plant a seed now for workforce housing is also.
Oh, okay, I think we talked about housing last year, right?
We didn't
So-
solve it.
No.
Yeah.
Ideas, yeah. So Delaware Opportunities, to kind of give you a little bit of a background, is what's referred to as a community action agency. So in the 60s, during what we would sometimes refer to as the war on poverty, out of a lot of the efforts that were taking place came this development of what they were called community action agencies. And our purpose across the nation, there's like 1,000 agencies across the nation. Our mission is to help primarily low income individuals become self-sufficient, basically. Every one of us is a little different. Most, if not all of the counties, not all of the counties, Sullivan County doesn't have one, but most of the counties in New York State has a community action agency. In Delaware County, what's very unique is that in other counties, like I live in Chenango County, and in Chenango County, similar to other counties, is there's a lot of agencies that are all doing a piece of the work, right? In Delaware County, we're kind of the catch-all. Like we have Catholic Charities and we have other agencies that serve the county, but they're not always necessarily physically focused here. So we kind of become kind of the hub for people in need, and then we can refer out to Catholic Charities or to family planning or to wherever else people are in need of services. So it gives us a unique opportunity to kind of help people in a variety of different ways. And in many cases, provide almost like a one-stop shop so that people aren't hopping from agency to agency when they're in need, because who wants to feel like that's what they have to do? They want to go one place and have people help them with whatever they need. So as an agency, we serve people from birth through our seniors. So we have programs like WIC, Start, Healthy Families. We do weatherization. We do all the rental assistance for Section 8 HUD rental assistance for the county. We do senior dining program. We have agency operated foster homes. We do all of the domestic violence and victim services for the county, including the Child Advocacy Center. Actually, we're gearing up to build an addition, and part of that addition will be a physical Child Advocacy Center. We're one of only 2 counties in the entire state of New York that does not have a physical location. So we're excited to be able to make that happen. We also have a lot of emergency services. We oversee the food pantry network for the whole county. A network of 17 food pantries, including the one that's based in our building in Hamden. Homeless assistance, SNAP outreach, you name it, we're probably involved in it in some way. So childcare is also one of the things that falls under our umbrella. So we have a daycare department, and their responsibilities include things like licensing and registration, childcare resource and referral, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Daycare subsidies, legally exempt working with legally exempt providers, So everything daycare related kind of falls under our umbrella too. So it often puts us in a unique position to kind of really know and understand what's happening in the community. Not only from the perspective of the partners that we work with, but also from the clients who are telling us like, this is what is happening in the world. And probably like you all know, sometimes there's a disconnect between those two, right? What we think we know and what people are really telling us they know. So as a community action agency, we're also required, we're bound by federal and state organizational standards. So that's what makes us unique and different from another nonprofit, is we actually have organizational standards that we're bound by, that we get evaluated on every year. And one of those standards of many is that we conduct an annual needs assessment every 3 years. So every 3 years, we're going to the community, going to our partners, going to our staff, and really pinpointing what the needs are so that we make sure our services align with them. The other requirement that also gives us some insight is we're required to have what's called a tripartite board. And what that means is your typical nonprofit has a board of directors, and they have whatever process they have for onboarding those new directors. Our board is required to be made up of a third of people that represent like the public sector. So maybe somebody from higher ed, we have to have an attorney on our board. We have to have somebody from education. A third of our board has to represent the low income population we serve. So those individuals have to be democratically elected from the communities that they serve. And then 1/3 has to be public officials. So currently those officials are board of supervisor members. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but they have to be a public official of some sort. So it gives us this unique perspective to be able to have people who are at the government level making decisions, and the people at the ground level who are seeing every day what's happening, and the people that are working in those areas in the middle kind of all come together to make decisions. So it's exciting and challenging at the same time.
Well, Shelly, let me, I don't want to take you off track, but you said that a third of that board are folks who are receiving services, let's say. How do you identify it? How do you said they're democratically elected?
They have to be.
How does that work?
Well, they have to be representative of that population. They don't necessarily have to be low income themselves, although
Okay,
sometimes they are. And typically, we outreach into particular communities to try to make sure we're well represented in
Sure.
the county. And then we typically use our food banks, our food pantries we actually do like paper ballots, like people can from the community come in and vote. We'll put a press release out on the paper. If there's anybody else that's interested, they can be added to the ballot. And then people will come in and vote. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So when Ray asked me to talk specifically about childcare, it was interesting because I recently was at a meeting where I heard some information, and even though I knew it like, I had this like aha moment, like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And so I asked them for the report that they were sharing. It's dated 2020, but some of this information is still relevant. So I just wanted to share this with you. This is an annual report that our Child Care Resource and Referral put together in 2020. That kind of gives you an idea of kind of what we do and kind of what's happening in our county, including the number of providers that we have. I do think we have a couple new providers since COVID. There's been a lot of incentive money out to help people start as a new provider. However, if you're not aware, becoming a daycare provider is a very lengthy and cumbersome process. So it's all, and people are in your home, poking around, like it takes a lot of things for somebody to be ready to take that on. I was looking for a particular number, on page 4, it talks about the number of centers that are in our county. So granted, again, this maybe give or take a couple, in terms of the family daycare providers, but this is the number of legally registered providers we have in our county. So when you think about the size of our county and the population of our county, that's not very many.
No.
The other thing I want to mention is, I that it was in here. They
Could you
shared
describe what those
Sure.
are?
Yeah. So a daycare center would be like Delhi's campus daycare. It would be, I think there's one,
Like the Coleman Center
Yep.
over in Sydney.
Head Start, centers that we operate. Family daycare is when somebody has a daycare center in their home. So I decide I want to have a daycare center, considered a family daycare. Group family daycare is when families come together to license together. So like me and my friend are gonna do daycare together at my house, but we're considered a group family daycare.
And is that just for your kids? Or is
No.
that bringing in others?
Yep,
Okay,
Yep, these
okay.
are all for bringing in
Okay.
others. School age programs would be like after school programs, like the program at Walton, after school, or there's an after school program, I think in Hancock.
Mhm.
Those are have to be licensed. You can't just, if you're not connected to state ed, you can't just decide to have an after school program. It has to be licensed.
What about crop?
I think those
That's
kids are
not-
older. So I think they're outside. I think it's up to age 12, I believe. If they're 13 and older, they don't need that licensing. And then legally exempt providers are people, grandmas who watch their grandkids at home. Like technically you can't just babysit a bunch of kids at your house. Like you have to, if you have over, I think it's a couple kids, like you have to be registered or official in some way. Legally exempt providers are people that aren't interested in being a daycare, but maybe they got 3 or 4 kids that they're watching during the day. And so there's a process they go through so they don't get a knock on their door saying, why do you have all these kids at your house? So there's a little bit of a definition too on the right-hand column on page 4, probably does a better job than I just did, but I wanted to mention, is what they mentioned on the bottom of that page on the left-hand column is the capacity across all of those programs for the county. So if you add up those number of kids, that's not a lot, and some of those numbers have changed. One of the figures that I heard the other day was that in our county, we only have something like 62 or 63 infant spots across the whole county. So what happens when you're a new mom and you need to go back to work and there is literally no spot for you and you don't have a grandma that can watch your child? Because what we're also seeing is seniors are more and more independent. And where a grandma might have been willing to, or have been retired early to watch children, grandmas are now still working and able to, right? So I have staff who have had to resign their positions or not take jobs because they don't have childcare. And it's, what a terrible position to be in where you literally have no options. So when Ray asked me to talk about this, I thought it was particularly timely because it, like housing, it's a very complex issue, and it's not like, you know, our staff work with people every day, encouraging them, helping them through the registration process. But without people that are willing to get registered, you know, we struggle. And it's interesting, a neighboring organization recently reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in having a conversation about some sort of daycare program to support our employees, which I thought was a great idea, and I was happy to talk about it. The problem with childcare is it's almost not even self-sustainable. So it doesn't make enough money for it to be a venture. That's why you don't see a lot of businesses like creating childcare programs for their staff. A lot of times, I know even when I used to work at Morrisville State College, and when I worked there, I think the daycare center cost us money, but it was something the college was willing to take on because of its value to its employees. But so that puts us in a really tough position because it's not like entrepreneurs are knocking down the door to be like, Ray, help me set up a daycare center, but I'm going to be a millionaire. So we have this conundrum where we need people to go to work, and we want people to be able to have the freedom to start their family and grow their family. But now, how do they do that and be able to go back to work? So like I said, we're always looking to kind of cultivate and raise awareness of what that process looks like, how you enroll. But I think like housing, like transportation, I think some of these serious needs that our communities have, really, you know, to really move the needle of change in a community, you need a truly collaborative effort. There's no one agency, there's no one person, there's no one answer that's going to solve some of these problems. I think one of the things that sometimes happens in our community is not everybody's as good at collaboration probably as we would like them to be. So, you know, here you have these big issues and you bring people to the table, yet you're missing big people that need to
Yeah.
be part of the conversation. So I do believe, however, that change does start with one person, and that the more we talk about these things and the more we speak up about them when we're at the table of places where we can kind of create that change, the more likely we are to gain buy-in from those that can be part of that change making. But yeah, so here we are. So I didn't come to you with a magic answer, but I definitely came to you with like a real picture of what the challenge is. And on the front of housing, it's not much different, right? So we have an aging housing stock. We do not have the high-end housing to attract the people we need for some of our high-level positions in the county. We do not have age-friendly housing. So people are maybe forced out of their houses at a much earlier age to go to like assisted living centers because they can't stay in their homes. It's not safe. We have no rental units. During COVID, I think Shelly Johnson Bennett, who is the director of the planning department, shared something like Hancock has like over 100 registered Airbnb units. So what happened during COVID, because what happened to landlords during COVID?
They weren't.
They got the raw end of the deal. So what happened is landlords got wise and they realized, well, first of all, if nobody's paying rent, then they're not taking care of their rental unit. So the places are getting trashed. And what happened is the landlords got wise and realized, if I turn these into Airbnbs, people from the city will pay the money and they'll stay in them. I don't have to rent them out.
And they'll actually pay.
Right, and they'll pay more than what maybe you'd have to have it set at for like a subsidized apartment. So we have a situation where we have a shortage of rental units. And a lot of the rental units we do have are just sitting empty. Or we have landlords that are really terrible landlords that aren't taking care of properties. I was talking to one of my homeless advocates this morning. We have a gentleman who is living in a trailer with no heat and no water, and he's being charged $500 a month.
Now, keep in mind, there's an interesting upside to an industry has been created and is booming now in the Catskills because of the Airbnbs.
Yeah.
What is it? Maintenance and home cleaners.
Yeah.
Look at all of the different home cleaning businesses that have popped up, and I have struggled because that's not something I want to do. And I have struggled, and I just finally got somebody I think is trustworthy.
Yeah.
To come in and actually do a good job.
Yeah.
But there's a lot, and what's happened is with all industry, they pop up, they get out there, and some are really good and they continue to grow and go, and others are a nightmare. Right?
It's an interesting point too that you make, because there's kind of an upside and a downside to all of this, right? And all of these things have ripple effects. And I think one of the things that's most concerning is if you can't attract talent, that hurts our businesses that keep our systems going. If we can't, I say this all the time, like if you don't have a place to lay your head at night that's safe and warm, hopefully, you're not gonna be able to take care of your mental health needs, your substance use needs, your workforce needs. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, these are basic needs we're talking about. If you're hungry and you don't have a place to put your head and you don't feel safe, the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. However, and I remember talking about this with your group last year, there's this mentality in some of our communities that we want those people gone. Well, what does that mean? We're all people. And so I think rather than addressing the issue, which is in part the lack of housing, we want to kind of point the finger at other things that we feel are wrong that are causing it. There is
Create the bad guy.
There is a movement and some resources. The county is going to be doing a housing study, and part of the study is to look at all aspects of housing and kind of evaluate what's feasible, and then out of that hopefully will become some collaborative efforts to like address it. The other thing that our county is really struggling with, which hurts with workforce, especially like it's like entry level workforce positions, is we don't have any transitional housing. So we have people coming out of jail, we have people coming out of rehab, we have people coming out of the domestic violence shelter, and there's no place for them to go. Or there's an apartment, but it's not going to be available for a couple months. So we're consistently finding people that are living under the bridge or living in a tent or sleeping in their car. And
Shelly, you have any idea of numbers of homeless right now?
I do, I don't know it off the top of my head, but they did a pit count this year, which is where they count how many homeless people, like physical homeless people there are. They just did that this year,
You got a ballpark?
thousands.
Wow,
And understand that
absolutely.
so
hidden.
this is Delaware County, it's as big as some states. And that's 1,000 people interspersed all around the county. They disappear to us. We don't see them.
Mhm.
And among them is a potential worker for your business, for your business, for your business, okay? And that makes me ask you a different question. What is available to help develop some of your families, your clients, the people that are marginalized trying to build towards independence?
Mhm.
What's available to help them with what I call the cultural capital?
So one of the programs that we have, one of many programs that kind of help address that, but one in particular that I was thinking of while you were talking is we have a family development program. And that program basically, in it, when we say family, I use that loosely. A family could be one person, it could be people married with kids, it could be whatever
Partners,
version.
yeah.
And that program has people that go and meet with families in the community and meet them where they're at. And the families set goals for what they want to do. So there is an income requirement, but the people we're talking about would qualify. But the goal is to empower those families to identify goals for themselves that help them to get to that level of self-sufficiency that they need. And what that person also does is helps to connect them to the supports and resources that can help them do that. So, okay, you're homeless. Okay, let's get you connected with the homeless program that has money to help you with security deposit and get an apartment. Okay, you have an interest in a job, but you don't have a way to get there. We have a Wheels for Work program that helps with car loans to purchase cars. So their job is to connect them and be knowledgeable about all the services, both in our agency and outside of our agency, to help them meet and achieve those goals.
And they are employees of yours?
Those staff, yes, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I ask that because that's the thing that makes the magic,
Yeah.
right? Because one of the things that happens to folks, and remember, we have those folks, and then we have folks we're trying to attract in that may already have some certain skill sets, right? But we can't forget that among the folks that Shelly speaks of are potential people with the right development
Mhm.
who could become incredibly loyal, long-term contributors.
And I'll be honest, we as an agency hire a lot of those people. We've hired people out of our work in progress program. I interviewed somebody for Head Start the other day that who's working in our family development program, who we donated clothes to, who came in those clothes to her interview. So, that's part of like what we do. I think one of the things we're seeing, and I don't know if you guys are seeing this in your businesses, but we're not having a hard time filling middle manager and up kinds of jobs. But what we're seeing is people coming out of college or with little experience thinking that they're ready for those jobs, whereas some of us expect that we might have started at the bottom and worked our way up. I know I did. I would never have expected in a million years to walk out of college with my bachelor's and be like, yep, I'm going to be the director, but there is that sense of confidence in our younger generation, which is great. I have a brand new HR director who's 24. She's marvelous. I love her, but I don't know that 10 years we would have hired somebody for that position without a bit more experience under her belt. So what's happening is that pool of candidates that might have filled those entry level for us direct service positions have jumped to the next level. And so that leaves us in a position to be able to, and we want to, help create opportunities for folks that we might not have looked at in the same way otherwise. And so I spent a lot of time with my supervisor saying, you know, let's not just focus on what someone comes to the table with, but the potential that they have to be trained, to be cultivated. Because think about how much loyal an employee is when you give them that chance and then you help cultivate them into the employee you want to be. But that's a total shift in how we think about hiring and bringing on new people, where in the past it was always, it had to be somebody who was super qualified and the most qualified and looked picture perfect. And
I need Indeed.
yeah, and now that's probably not gonna be the case, because there's far more jobs than there are people looking for jobs. And we all need people. I mean, I hear it every day about how short-staffed people are. So what's great for the people that we're talking about is they're now getting chances they might not have been getting otherwise. We're taking a chance on people maybe that we otherwise would have looked past. So, but I think when we do that, I think it's important that we remember that sometimes comes with challenges that may dictate a different kind of supervision or support than what you would give to another employee who maybe didn't have those same challenges.
Well, you just said it. Used to be it was all supervision. Now it's supervision and support.
Yeah.
It's coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
You guys, I know are gonna have questions. Let's go. Ideas?
Beth, you were the, we were talking about childcare or lack thereof services last time. So I'm gonna look to you to.
Yeah, so I'm still not exactly sure where to go with it, because obviously I already am employed. Like, for me to open a daycare myself would not be very logical in my point stand right now. I just don't know where I need to go, because I was explaining to Ray, so my daughter is 4, she's in pre-K in Hancock. It's a half-day program, but she still needs daycare afterwards.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere other than finding people that are just, how do I put it, kind of like you said, they're not licensed.
Yeah.
So for me to help to even, like, let's say put her into a daycare to like help pay or something, like I can't do that because they're not licensed. And I think the closest one is Deposit.
Have you ever called our agency?
Not recently. When I first had her, I worked with you guys a little bit. She actually went to the Head Start in Fishes-Eddy.
Okay.
She absolutely loved it there.
The only reason I mentioned that is every county has a child care resource and referral program. And that's what one of the services we provide. And what that service is intended to do is to help you as a parent, as well as other, employers or anyone who wants the information, but help you identify where there are spots. And they can specifically tell you if there's family daycare providers and if they have spots available. And so they can help you to do all of that. The bigger question is what happens when you call them and they tell you there's nothing.
Exactly.
And that's the bigger problem that we're speaking about here, that really doesn't have a good answer yet, but definitely one that we should and need to be talking about. And I think if COVID did anything for us, the one thing that it did is shine the light on how significantly important childcare is. Because prior to that, nobody wanted to talk about childcare. Nobody wanted to support childcare. Nobody really gave a crap about childcare unless you needed it yourself. But it wasn't something we were talking about. It wasn't really rising to the level of need in the same way transportation and housing was. And during COVID, when all of a sudden our emergency providers don't have childcare and need it, all of a sudden now as a society, we're paying attention to childcare. So it'll be interesting to see what happens down the road, because there's been a lot of money that's come out that has helped support new providers to get set up and established. And I'm curious, to see what the state does beyond that, because this isn't going to stop being an issue.
And it's interesting too, how you said like some employers like look into providing childcare for their employees. And I believe actually, because we under the new we're under Vestra-Care now. They had talked about possibly putting in a daycare here at the nursing home. I don't exactly have high hopes because I don't think they're gonna think that it's like sustainable, like money wise, like you said. And I just, it makes me sad because like you said, in healthcare especially too, I mean, people are getting mandated left and right. And that was always a big thing that it's so hard to find childcare and then try to find someone in healthcare that your hours are unreliable trying to get back to your kid.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer, and I think I practice this probably more than my staff would like, but I'm a firm believer that sometimes we just have to wipe the slate clean and think outside the box. We get really caught up in the boxes we put ourselves into and the way we do things, that it's sometimes hard to see our way out of that and into a new idea that we've never thought of. And I think that those are the kinds of solutions it's gonna take to address some of the needs that we have in our community: housing, transportation, childcare, food insecurity. Like, we can't just keep doing the same thing and think we're gonna get a different result. I think it's gonna take people really thinking outside the box and being willing to try something different, because otherwise, I mean, this is 2 years in a row I came to this table, we talked about housing. And so, you know, how many years in a row do we as communities keep talking about the same issues, but we're not really doing anything to help people? But that also means that our leadership in our county need to be willing to talk about those issues as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And what is your sense there?
You're monk friends.
I think elected officials come into their positions with their own priorities. And I think they're human beings too, like all of us. And I think if they don't have that knowledge or haven't been impacted by those issues, sometimes those issues are not priorities for them.
Very well said.
Yeah.
And we do have some communities, we have some mayors who, as Shelly alluded to, want to have nothing to do with supporting, because they see it as bringing in an undesirable part of the population into their communities.
I hear that there are kind of categories for what makes a population undesirable. So there's the underserved, the marginalized. There's the cityots. I hear about them.
Well,
What,
it's
you know,
it's
and-
money
and-
or no money is how, unfortunately, sometimes that's perceived.
Sitting here are exceptional minds. Okay, they're invested. They're knowledgeable. They're seeking more knowledge. They're imaginative. And they're looking for projects. I mean, so if you were to say, here is what would be a really interesting outside the box thing to be attacked, what would it be? Because you've wallowed in this verbiage of helplessness for some time now. You have to have visions of how we self-help.
Yeah, and certainly I do. That's what our agency does every day, is despite all of this, we figure out ways to help people.
How do we
Is it-
get that out into the community so more people are engaged?
Well, I think it starts with conversations just like this, and bringing people to the table that have a shared vision and the ability to share resources to create those opportunities. You know, some of the best things that we've done as an agency, particularly in the last few years, are things that we're doing with other agencies, with other organizations. You know, I think, you know, while childcare is definitely a huge need, I think right now, homelessness, housing, food insecurity are bigger needs. And in my opinion, those are connected to our basic needs. So until we address those things, and those things affect mental health, they affect the substance use challenges we have as a community. So, you know, I think, you know, to use your word, I didn't intend for it to sound like I was wallowing. However, these are the real needs that we're facing in the community. But I think that like-minded people come together every day at different tables to have these conversations. And I guess my comment about thinking outside the box was whether it's in this group or being part of other discussions, I do think there's a really real opportunity for human service organizations who are trying sometimes to solve these problems in a bubble to work together with our for-profit partners and our governmental partners to figure out, because we all have a different lens and we all have different resources, and to come together to create like measurable change in the community. If I believe there was nothing we could do, I wouldn't keep coming to work every day.
And by the way, she's never wallowed in her. But I think our communities are doing some wallowing, which is that process of identifying all the problems and continually going round robin to point to all the barriers rather than to try and look.
I suspect this is the group of the latter, but when I go to meetings, there tend to be a lot of people at the table that are the wallowers who know what the problems are, but I think that they lack the ability to strategically see a way out of it. And so I feel like at any table where you're trying to create change, you need the people who know what the problems are. But I think a lot of us know what those are. But you also need the people that can say, okay, here's an idea. This is how we're gonna make this happen. Let's do it. Let's put it into operation. And I think that's sometimes what we're missing at some of the tables is the people that are the doers. And I think as a community, unfortunately, the doers get burnt out pretty easy.
Yeah.
Right? Because we sign up for everything. We say yes, we come to these kinds of things, right? You know, when I go to meetings, I'm seeing the same faces at every meeting. So as long as we can build that army of doers, I think we can keep chipping away at the needs of the community. But you know, I always tell my staff, like, you don't come work for DL because it's a job. Like, you have to believe in what you're doing. No one's making millions working for our the people that work for me, they work for me because they love what they do. And they love the change, the change that they, or the impact that they can have on somebody's life. And so we need more doers. And obviously you're all here, I assume, because you are the doers, right? Or you want to, you know, see the benefit and being part of something like this. So I'm always open. And I think the more we create opportunities to really talk more specifically about these issues, even dive deeper than what we're doing today, but even, you know, Ray has spearheaded some efforts around transportation where we're actually doing something. So instead of just talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, we're really trying to do something. And I think that's the difference between what's happening in some of our communities and where we can actually have some impact.
I want to go back to childcare
Yeah,
and licensing and registration. And I have to believe that it's an onerous process
it is.
at minimum. And you mentioned that there were some probably federal block grants going through the state and to incentivize people to start such things.
There was
Are
a
those
lot-
still out there?
So there was a lot of money during CARES. During the CARES era of funding, that was to support current providers as well as help new providers. There has since been some stabilization money that was really geared more towards current providers, but helping current providers build capacity. So we did have a couple of providers that joined as group family providers who then could serve more kids. Right now there's desert money out there, and that is intended to help areas that are considered childcare deserts to basically start up new daycares. We've had several applicants in Delaware County and none of them have got selected by the state. So what happens is the state can select you and tell you that like you are awarded, but that there's no money. Because they had more requests than they had money, so we're like on the list, but that doesn't do us any good because we're too far down to get the money. So if other providers don't like follow through, then it's possible that some of our providers could get money, but we have several areas in our county that are considered part of that childcare desert. So whether or not those funds will keep going, that's kind of what we're not sure about. But the state has identified, obviously, that childcare is a need and there's a real lack of, I think this is probably a statewide issue.
Oh,
Not-
yeah.
Or beyond, you know.
Do you think most of those funds are going to more towards city providers?
No,
Or is it reaching more of the state?
I mean, the desert money, I'm not really sure about. I mean, we have some big urban areas and are outside of the city that probably get quite a bit of that as well.
Yeah.
The stabilization money though was pretty evenly distributed. Every single registered provider in our county applied for and got the stabilization money, including our Head Start centers. So things that we historically wouldn't have been able to do, like do repairs, we were able to use that money for that. You were able to use that money to increase the pay of your staff, because that's the other thing that's historically been a barrier for childcare providers is there's no money to pay your staff, so then you can't keep reliable staff, which then means you can't serve as many kids. So providers were able to use that money for that too. So outside of that desert money, I think the rest of it was distributed pretty equitably. Any other questions for me?
Well, I wanna
Not-
go back to childcare, but
I think we need to make these guys ask questions.
I
I have a bottle of water, so keep asking away.
I just had a lot, oh, I'm sorry.
No, please, no, you.
A lot of thoughts. So after interviewing a lot of people recently for jobs that we couldn't fill, we had a lot of applications, but a lot of them didn't have the skill set like you're saying, or couldn't just,
We're the right fit.
or just didn't know how to interview either. So like, it would be nice to be like, hey, you didn't get this job, but here's something you can take with you to learn how to do a resume, prepare for an interview or the training, or to get the training you need to be a better fit for your position, right? Then I also used to work in law enforcement, so this is the second thing. So after those people are released from jail, they're left with nothing, right? So we're
Literally
not
nothing.
give them a packet of resources. This is who you can go to, this is who you can call, housing, transportation, anything.
So I think two things. One, I think on the jail front, I think organizations have long since advocated for that kind of thing. I think we're at the mercy of that system, but that doesn't mean that agencies and organizations can't be creative in terms of how they connect with those people once they're outside of those systems. Because I think you're absolutely right. We had an employee who told us her story of like literally walking out of jail with nothing on her feet and like literally nothing, like didn't know where to go, what to do.
Arrested in July, and then you're let out in February and there's 3 feet of snow
Right.
on the ground
Correct.
and you have nothing.
Correct.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree that that's a concern. I think what you're talking about with interviews, I think the other thing that's so hard is because the flip side has probably happened to you. You've interviewed someone and they've been great, and then you start them and you're like, who are you? The thing is, people can practice and be great interviews and be crafty and vice versa. So, that's why I feel like sometimes, I guess. But this is just my philosophy and you can do with it what you may, but like, I think sometimes. Yes, it takes time and money to hire someone and onboard them. But I'm also paying a boatload in advertisements to keep posting a position for months and months and months and months. Sometimes I just take a chance on somebody, because what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? I'm gonna have to let them go, but at least I tried and I gave them a chance. And I didn't sit with a position vacant for months and months.
And we are also being, there's the hiring right now with the county with economic development. So they're giving you money to help train new employees. So I think you can do 2 a year.
train to work program.
I do love your idea though of having some sort of follow-up with people, and maybe that would even go a long way to encouraging them to come back to you when they were ready too.
And I think that's something we tried to emphasize and not discourage them, but like, when we see great potential in you, but you're not ready for this position yet. So yes, we'd like to hang on to your resume, but follow up and work on those skills.
Yeah.
So who helps them?
Well, yeah, exactly. They're like-
Follow up and work on this. All right, that's the key, because we need follow up and work on. Getting clothing. We need follow up and work on communication skills. We need, so for all these levels of needs, we have different, here's your path to the next step in your life. How do they get that? And it's fragmented. Am I right? if I
Well, the
say
workforce
it
development
feels
people are
fragmented?
supposed to be doing that. That's what they are specifically charged with.
I think that would be a good thing to add to, if more businesses added that, like you guys, if you're hiring, you implement that, like, once you're done with an interview. Like businesses should be contacting all of their subjects and saying, I'm sorry you didn't get the job.
Yeah.
Often they don't, but they should be, and with that saying, this is where we think you need to work on.
So here's an outside the box idea. This is something I applied for a federal grant. We didn't get it, but I, well, you know, I still want to make it happen. And then coincidentally, economic development, like, did something similar. But this summer youth employment program is a great model. Kids get a chance to gain experience as well as education about soft skills, resume writing, interviewing, and they're earning a paycheck while they're doing it, right? And so I thought to myself, why can't we do this with adults? And I think about all of your companies that have these entry-level positions, struggles that you're talking about where you're like, I don't know if it's worth it to take a chance on somebody. And I thought, what if we created a program like the summer youth employment program, but for adults, where you get an adult employee who's eligible for working for 6 weeks. They get paid out of the program fund, so it's no burden to you as an employer. And you get to train them and try them out. And meanwhile, they work for you 4 days a week, and 1 day a week during that 6 weeks, they have an education day where they're doing all of the stuff that you're talking about with people that are educated to do that. And at the end of 6 weeks, they gain experience and you get to decide whether you hire them permanently or not.
That would be, that would be an incredible improvement over what's being run right now.
Yeah.
What's being run right now is fine. The problem, as Shelly pointed out, well, Cam, you did too. The problem with that train to work program is that that person is now an employee of MTC. So at the end of those 6 weeks, if that person doesn't work out, you're on the hook for unemployment.
Otherwise, if you had that community that could share those employees. with those
Well,
person.
My thought was, is if you don't hire them, they're enrolled in a program in which they receive a stipend of some sort. So that avoids the employee piece.
They are not on your payroll.
Yeah.
Right, they're
And then
not
you
on
decide
payroll.
at
That
the end
is
of 6
huge.
weeks, if they've, to your point, addressed some of those things that you had maybe identified in the beginning.
It reduces the business that's like, I can't put that time and effort in.
And I think about how many clients do we have that we could literally slide right into that program that are looking for work, but have no idea where to go, or there's nobody willing to take a chance on them.
Well, they might not know that they're good at something until they do it too, right?
Well, and sometimes, a lot of times people surprise us, you
Yeah.
know?
And things they never thought of.
Yeah, they never thought of
Yeah.
this position, but they excel.
Yeah, well, and you see that with the kid, like I ran the summer youth employment program for one of the summers when I worked in Shenango County. And it's amazing to see their growth over the summer and how much it helps with the people that they're working for. And I just thought to myself, like, can't we do this with adults?
Now, I want to speak to that. Because I always like to make sure we have a broad perspective. I was a high school counselor a lot of years ago. When this money first started coming in through, it was called PIC at the time, the Private Industry Council. It's gone through different ideations. And I worked with a great teacher, he was a technology shop teacher. And he and I pulled the program into Sydney, working with PIC. It was very challenging to work with the bureaucracy. And it was incredibly beneficial to the kids. Not all the kids. So when you go after something like this, which is an absolutely brilliant idea, you have to go after it with the realization that people who are starting behind have a harder time getting through. So if you have a success rate of 60%, that kid goes through the summer employment. It was 4 days a week, and then 1 day a week they got educational skills. Our goal was to have them go through the program, develop a connection to the world of work, while also getting what they needed to be more successful academically the following year, both components. If we hit like a 50% measurable improvement rate, we were dancing. So programs like that are important and successful It's just that you don't want to oversell the
Mhm.
potential of the program because sometimes they have to fall on their face a couple times,
There's a-
right?
Yeah, I agree. And there's another model out there, just throw out one other idea. There's another model out there. That's done by several, it's supported by several United Ways in other areas of the country. It's like an employee. I'm not gonna remember the acronym, but I can find it out. But basically, in essence, it's a program where you bring on almost like a case manager who works either for your company or in your company. And their job, like an EAP program, like helps people if they have
Oh.
a challenge, but you bring on a case manager who is specifically there to meet with your staff. Who maybe are new hires that you're a little concerned about, people with absenteeism, people with performance issues, and their job is to be a case manager. To help navigate like what's going on and where like is the reason you don't come to work 3 times out of the week because you have childcare issues. Okay, let's look at what resources exist in the community connected to the resources
Barrier busted.
to try to help you retain those employees, because let's be honest, your HR department doesn't have time to do that. Nor do they maybe have the knowledge of what's available. So this person would
Or if
come
you
in
have an HR
specifically, right? So they would come in specifically with that knowledge to do that, and that literally could be a person that's based at an organization like mine or Catholic Charities that companies subcontract with to come in, maybe they come 2 days a week, that's
is-
another idea.
That is a fascinating idea.
But what a great way to bridge the gap between for-profit companies and nonprofits.
Do you see a gap in there? So we talk like from the NGO level
Mhm.
to the for-profit level and trying to bridge that gap for, so maybe not to change gears too much from the workforce piece, but we talked about like the actual doing of the work is
Mhm.
difficult. And I know sometimes a lot of these areas when actually like boots on the ground piece, it
Yeah.
turns into like volunteer armies as far as outreaches and stuff like that too. So it's tough to get people to keep coming out and show support from a community level to buy in. But then we speak about childcare and shelter, and like those are primary, kind of like what you said, it's like base level needs
Mhm.
to be able to facilitate. So from that, you talked funding and grants, is there a split there between the NGO side and the profit side? And is there, when you look at grants and opportunities, is it more for like staffing needs, or is it brick and mortar for locations? Is it just that the areas aren't big enough, or there's not enough people, or?
It's probably more staffing than anything else.
Right,
The majority of, I can't tell you the ratio, but the majority of the money, I mean, I would say probably 40%, between 40 and 50% of our budget every year is just on the people. And we could use lots more people. I think that there's a couple things. I think there has to be a trust between for-profit and nonprofit. So you have to be willing to share with us what the needs are. We have to be willing to listen, and we have to be willing to follow through if we say we can do something. And there has to be a trust or a willingness to try that. And I think from the nonprofit side, we can go after grants and funding that you can't.
right.
But sometimes that's not enough, and that's where some of your companies that have foundations or give donations, like, I mean, some of you here have given us donations. I think when we can come together, so both sides have some skin in the game, then it makes it more meaningful too. But again, it starts with kind of a leap of faith that like, it seems like we have the same vision and I think we can do this. Let's see. I'm a big advocate of pilots.
Yep.
I think let's start small, see if it works, get some data before we decide to roll out this massive thing that doesn't, yeah. And then it makes it an easier sell when you're trying to get other people to buy in and support it or to help fund it or whatever, but I don't know if that answers your question.
No, yeah, no, absolutely. No, go ahead.
Well, I know Caitlin's.
Oh, good. No, I'm just thinking, I'm just absorbing everything I'm thinking right now, just absorbing and. Yeah, a lot going on in your head.
I have lots of ideas and my staff laugh at me because I like, I have an idea and I'll hear them. Or I come back for meetings, I'll be like, you'll never guess what I decided we're gonna do. And then I'm going on, Shelly. Because we need more people,
Right. No, and that's somewhere I find myself, I have friends that work in the NGO space and my wife has worked in that area for 15, 20 years on a data entry level, but was administering programs and stuff like that. Nothing that was fairly localized. It was kind of more of a widespread thing, but then to see the work that people can do at a global level or in third world countries, then you recognize like, oh, there's an immediate need like next door.
Yeah,
And how can we take some of those structures and, you know, get
Yeah.
people more food and get
Oh.
people more assistance and.
I'm glad you mentioned food, because I need to say something real quick about food. Food insecurity is one of my largest concerns going into the winter besides homelessness. Because we're not getting as much food. If you've gone to the grocery store, you've noticed the shelves are not as full. Our food banks rely on food from the regional food bank, and there's less and less food at the food bank. During our mass distribution days, we normally get 24 pallets. By the end of the summer, we were down to 12, still saving the same amount, serving the same amount of people. The grocery store programs that we're involved in, where we get stuff that they have to take off their shelves that isn't bad yet, but they have to remove from those shelves, we're getting less and less of that because they have less. So we're starting to feel a crunch of not enough food at the same time as we're seeing a significant increase in demand for food. Going into a winter where fuel costs are gonna be really high, where everything costs more money, and yet we don't have enough food to go around. During for anybody that follows our Facebook page, I'm sorry, because you probably saw lots of chatter about this, but we were doing 2 distributions a month, one for dairy, one for food, both serve 400 households apiece. It would fill up on sign up days in a minute. 1 minute, 400 spots would sign up. So all summer we kept going, like, how do we do this in a fair way? By the end, we were doing 200 signups online, filled up in a minute, 200 signups they'd have to call. Our phone lines would be jammed. We'd have hundreds and hundreds of missed calls. So the demand for the food, for the need for the food has skyrocketed at a time when we're getting less and less food.
Is
That's scary.
How's that happening? You speak to the sourcing issue, is that? Because I've
It's a
worked at
supply
the
chain.
I've worked at the larger like Walmart spaces, and there was spaces where if there was a product that was okay, but couldn't be.
I think it's a national
It would
supply
be,
chain
they have
issue.
their thing, but then there's stores like Freshtown. I
Mhm.
know when I worked there, we would have partners with the CAP or with the Margaretville pantry,
Yeah.
or, you know what I mean, so there was avenues to have some of those
And
conversations.
we still have some of that, but I think at the magnitude that we need
It's
it.
not, yeah, it's not.
I do think that this is directly an impact of COVID, and it's a supply chain issue that eventually will work itself out, hopefully. But my worry is going into this winter in particular, where we're anticipating a much higher increase in fuel costs than we've ever encountered in a long time. To then also have families have to spend even more money on food. I don't know. I don't know what that's gonna, what
And
that's
if they
gonna
need
look
to get
like.
to work, they're spending more money on gas.
Do you guys?
I have
have-
staff that can't get to work because they can't afford the gas.
Do you guys have, I don't know what kind of volunteer programs you have for, like, if people wanted to volunteer and get approved to drive somebody to work. Like,
Yeah.
if they wanted to sign up and say, I
Yeah,
drive by there all the time, why don't we carpool, I'll drive you to work.
yeah,
Or for the groceries, like the food,
Yeah.
do you have somewhere where like families could go and I could say, hey, I can pick up a grocery list for this family.
yeah.
I'm not sure if there is anything like that, or if that would be even helpful.
I think there
but-
is for seniors.
Okay.
I know Get There is always looking for volunteer drivers. We
Okay.
actually have paid drivers.
Mhm.
And that transportation is a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
That's also another area where there's not enough money to pay for the cost to provide the service.
Right, yeah,
But I'm always open to volunteer ideas.
right, like, it's just what I'm thinking, it's like kind of Uber, or like in your head, like,
Mhm.
as people can sign up and say, I can be an Uber and I
Yeah.
don't need to get paid,
I think
but,
the issue though, that I'm referring to is people that can't afford the food.
yeah,
And the places that would go to get the food, like the food bank, are having less and less food.
yeah,
So my concern is, I don't ever want there to be a day where somebody walks into one of our 17 food pantries and there's not enough food.
yeah,
And that's like, I remember years ago when I worked in Chenango County, Roots and Wings would always do these huge can drives, and they needed all these canned items. And I remember, like, I think they use that to really supplement what's on their shelves. I don't want to have to be so reliant on donations of food that we don't know if we can feed people if
right,
they
you don't
need
have a
it.
guarantee.
we just had those governmental meetings. Is there anything we can do at that level too, to try to, and it's probably not a fast process, and Diane spoke to some of the bureaucracy that we run into, some of this sometimes too, right, which is the wall to push through, I think, oftentimes.
I think the more people, particularly local elected officials, I think the more people that are talking about the issues in front of those people, the more they start to hear it and they start to realize, wow, like I'm hearing this at every meeting I go to, I'm hearing these people talk about these issues. I think what sometimes happens in our community, it's the same people and we start to feel like a squeaky wheel to them. Versus, you know, something that's actually like getting through, like, oh, this might actually be a problem. And I think to see businesses and organizations come together on issues, I think is really impactful as well. And I think, you know, we're gonna keep trying to create change with or without them, but it certainly would be helpful with them.
When businesses step up,
That's huge.
it gets the attention of the common person. The challenge I'm seeing is that you have a critical mass of how big a business is it? How much of their resources? I will tell you that I think MTC, I can't fathom the percentage of their resources that get focused on community service. But I think it's sizable, right? The college, the hospitals, the schools to a degree, a great deal gets done in schools actually. But then beyond that, you've got the retail, you've got the restaurants, you've got other small businesses or medium businesses that do not have the level or do not perceive that there's something in it for them to get engaged in something like that. So for them, it would be a shared support of some type. I think about BOCES, Board of Cooperative Educational Services. That cooperation project is try to get 15 superintendents to agree on a calendar. Oh, what a show, right?
But to your point, I think for those of us that are the doers, I think it's our responsibility to show the path that can make it happen. I think what's very overwhelming for smaller businesses, for school districts, or even just for some of your businesses, is if an organization says, like mine says, hey, let's partner on something, what can we do to help you? Where do you even start? How do you even know it's possible? Like, if you don't know, you don't know. And so I think sometimes you paint the picture of what it could be. It might change and shift a little bit before you get to what you agree upon. But I often find sometimes when you give people something to start from, it's easier to get their buy-in than ask them to imagine something that they can't see. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So here's a crazy example, maybe a crazy example, maybe not. So
I like crazy.
we work at the phone company. There was a collaboration between Delhi and MTC to serve DCEC power customers, right? There's collaboration there to spread broadband service throughout the county, a bunch of tremendous grants through the state, all that kind of stuff. Now through COVID, there's the ACP program, if I'm saying that right, because there's too many acronyms to remember them all. An Affordable Connectivity Program that we can now provide internet service, and then the resident then gets a credit on their bill that makes their internet bill more affordable. And then we talk about workforce opportunities and all that kind of stuff. And it might be a smaller piece. I think there's two sides of this. Might be a smaller piece where it's either linking that program up with the necessary piece of our population that would be able to utilize it, whether it's through MTC or DTC or at Seago Tel or whoever it had the service provider there. And then two, could you flip that into partnering with some of these organizations with the adult work program? I don't even know what you call that, but the summer reshape, and work that into some remote opportunities if broadband was available and it fits. Some entities it might not work, right? You're not gonna get a job at at Freshtown and be able to work remotely. There might be some employers that can have remote work.
And there's a lot of pressure right now for employers to be flexible because that's what employees candidates are looking, a lot of candidates are looking for is at least some level of flexibility in their schedule like
Right.
that. But the biggest barrier to your point is, if you don't have reliable internet, like I have employees that can't work from home because they don't have reliable internet.
And their kids can't learn.
Correct.
Right, and yeah, I mean, we saw a bunch of that during COVID, and there were some cases where people had the cash to pay. And there were other places where we partnered with the school district, and they said,
Yeah.
hey, we need to get this
Yeah.
kid internet because they can't get on Zoom to do their calls.
Yeah.
You know, and we're like, okay, we'll just make it happen, you know, to kind of your point of.
Well, and I think those are the kinds of collaborative thinking that has to happen even around these other issues. You know, what I mean?
Okay.
that was,
You just said something a while ago that made my brain go in a new direction. So let me put this up. You described a collaboration already in place. Del Hightel, MTC. Who else?
Delaware County
DCEC.
Electric Co-op.
Delaware County. Those people have already got relationships that have resulted in an effective collaboration. Another model that is worth looking at is to go to the relationship and get them talking about the other challenges they share. Use the preformed trust, because building trust, I just laughed when she said trust, because we've talked about it so much. Building trust takes time. They already have it.
Mhm,
That takes a lot of crap out of the way,
mhm.
right?
And I think there is a lot of those preformed relationships. I think if you really, stop and think about it, there are a lot of those pre-existing preformed relationships in our communities already. Like I think about like our agency is very involved in a project with faculty and staff at Delhi. And one of the conversations we have had is what can we do together more? How do we bring something on a larger scale to the college? We don't, and in turn, could you then have that knowledge of our services and supports that you could offer to your not only your students, but your faculty and staff. Like there's a lot of opportunities going back to those preformed relationships that we haven't really explored, because we come together, there's a plan, you do it, but then if you
You
take
see,
it, the next
You come
step.
together around the issue. All right, but then the complexity of the issue bogs it down,
That is true too.
all right? Whereas if you have a preformed relationship, you come together with the issue. You may not do this, you may only do this,
Mhm.
but this is movement in the right direction.
Agreed.
Now, healthcare and nursing homes. I think about that.
Mhm.
It's a completely different segment.
Mhm.
How do they fit into all of this?
So I think, I think they see a lot of people and they see a lot of people in need. And they have a vested interest in perhaps preventing people from needing their services, right? So wellness and just the well-being of people, I think, is of a concern. I'll give you an example. Recently, we're part of the creation of a rural health network that focuses on gaps in behavioral health services in the county. It's a dual county network that's made up of people from Shangle County and people of Delaware County. And there are people from the county, there are people from human service organizations, there are people with lived experience, there aren't people from businesses. Just made a note of that. There are people, and there are people from healthcare, and we all have a slightly different connection to that topic, but bring with us a wealth of knowledge and ability to collaborate. And the goal is really for us to develop that network so that we can help create change to identify and address some of those gaps that we have when it comes to particularly people with mental health and substance use disorder.
Define what those gaps are.
Not enough service, not the ability to access services when they're most needed. There's a long wait time. We don't have enough beds or access to beds. And if there are beds available, they're often outside of the community where people maybe can't get to. We don't have providers. And so part of our conversation has been around prevention. And how do we help people before they get to the point of crisis where they need those other services?
Okay.
We had a gentleman who was in desperate need of services, substance use and mental health challenges, and really needed to address that before he was gonna be able to address anything else. Made an appointment with mental health, had to wait weeks and weeks and weeks for his appointment because they're short-staffed and they're doing the best they can.
Right.
Didn't have transportation, and the transportation he tried to arrange or that got arranged for him was unreliable, fell through, ended up trying to walk from Delaware to Melton. Didn't get to his appointment in time, so they canceled it.
Oh.
And in order to reschedule it, he was gonna have to wait weeks and weeks and weeks again, so he just didn't bother.
Are there other, Ray's been talking about like the Appalachian kind of setup that we live in. Are there other programs, maybe not in this state, but maybe within that region? That we can, you say think outside of the box, doesn't necessarily need to be a New York.
Who
Right.
created
Right, doesn't
something.
need to be a New York thing, but is there something else?
I guess other people's
Right,
ideas.
well, the wheels there, it's not a. Right, it's a wide, all these issues that we're talking about, I think are widespread and fairly regional, or we can regionalize it to our area, right? So,
So like one example related to this area is one of the things that's come out of that network is they've established a MAP program, mobile assistance, I don't know, MAP, whatever that acronym stands for. A MAP program in Shenango County, and basically what it is all of the law, the Norwich City Police Department and the Shenango County Sheriff's Department are participating, and all of their officers are trained to use these iPads, so when they go out on mental health calls, specifically mental health. If rather than arresting someone, because what happens when a police officer goes out, if you have a mental health crisis, they're putting you in handcuffs. And they're bringing you in, which is sometimes more traumatizing. So what happens is if they go out and they determine it's a mental health crisis, they use this iPad to put in information that flags MCAT, which is the mobile crisis program. And so MCAT can be deployed to come and respond, whether it's remotely or in person, to this emergency, so the police don't have to like take this person out of handcuffs down to Binghamton to CPAP. So the hope is to help more people triage more situations before it gets to the point where it needs that kind of intervention.
Which is cool, because like in a small community like ours too, you're taking in like one officer that may be on duty that night, like in Milton, to drive somebody to Binghamton, so there could be an emergency happening in that area too, so I think.
And to be honest, what happens is by the time the officer gets back to Walton, CPAP's determined it's not urgent enough for a bed and they've been released.
Yeah.
And now they're stuck in Binghamton with no transportation.
No.
Yeah.
And so the police officer is going back to pick them up.
Can I jump in on the transportation?
Sure.
So being in the healthcare industry, I've noticed a lot, and I do all of our outpatient scheduling. So where we are located is on the Delaware County Sullivan line, but because we're technically actually Sullivan County, we have a lot of problems with transportation. So kind of the same thing, like trying to schedule appointments for me is hard because we only use one specific company, and they're actually very, very short on drivers to the point where they won't even do stretchers anymore.
Wow.
So it's become a big issue, just like you've said, like he had scheduled that that company, and then because I go through the insurance to get their transportation, and I could schedule a different company, but it doesn't mean they're actually going to come either. Just kind of the same situation that gentleman had. And it's become a big issue with trying to get anybody anywhere anymore, and it nowhere has any type of, how do I put it? It goes back to the staffing issue too as well.
Is it like an accreditation too,
Accreditation becomes a big thing. So I tried getting different companies to come here, and they actually can't, because unless they are delivering that person, essentially like if they were like a discharge and going back into Delaware County, they technically do that, but most of the time for us they can't, because they don't have accreditations to cross over into Sullivan County.
Right.
Right.
I think that your point is well taken, and
Yeah.
probably a conversation for another day.
Okay,
And this is a conversation I know, Ray is very invested in. Transportation is a serious barrier as it relates to healthcare, as it relates to workforce, as it relates to just being a human being that needs to get places in a community where you can't walk places. And I don't think the needs in Sullivan County probably are much different than the needs in Delaware County. But definitely your point is well taken, and I think I guess I'll end by saying, like, if we can't help people access these things that are basic needs.
Yeah.
Like, how do we expect people to be in a position to be qualified for a job
To
or to
contribute.
contribute or to, if people can't get to healthcare, sometimes they go to alternative means to take care of the things that are ailing them. So all of these things that we're talking about are so interconnected and have a ripple effect. And I think the best thing we can do, like Diane said, is start somewhere and kind of start chipping away. And that's what we do every day. Like, are we gonna go out and have the end all be all magic answer and save the universe? No. But can we start one family at a time, one idea at a time? Absolutely.
I just got a picture of you in a superhero. The end all and be all, saving community.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I hope this was
Shelly,
helpful.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You make. progress.
Any other last minute thoughts, questions? I think there's a lot to chew on.
Yeah.
Let's take,
Can we have your
let's,
contact information?
Sure, I didn't bring, I could have brought cards, that would have been. Well, I don't know.
is it okay? if I
Yeah,
share your
yeah.
email?
Awesome.
Let's
Take a
take,
break, let your brains rest. and-
let's take 10 minutes and reconvene at, around 5:00. Get up,
See what
stretch.
brilliance you're ready to bring forward.
Thank you. But, the, I'm the healthcare provider. You mentioned. The numbers just don't support.
You went through something that you're seeing.
That's the biggest issue, really.
Would,
Something's, there's a lot going on.
would
How
it
does this
be
fit with the community?
helpful,
It's
would they be
Very similar to
interested
what I work with. Regularly, like
to,
my position,
um,
my coworker's position is emergency
if-
assistance.
if
So I see a lot of like the Delaware opportunities.
I have access
that I
to,
see with like, housing crisis
business
child crisis and how it all kind of
support training.
webs
Mhm.
together into the
Um,
impact.
One that's
Sometimes it
based
is all
here in the company, it's a private company, Growth Wheel is here.
they're aware.
They, and I'm a certified Growth Wheel business advisor. If we were to put together
That's
specifically
See.
child using Growth Wheel, and I would, and that's something I would pitch
I want
to,
somebody regular with me.
I don't know if they would find something like the, like the workforce
Never call me.
development institute,
I can remember me.
Mary Jo Farrar and her folks.
Calling
Um,
out of business.
would that be,
Regular job.
Worth a shot.
This is all-
I mean, honestly, anything's worth a shot at this point. I mean, because really,
I'm thinking from the point of view of strengthening those, their business actions.
So here's that.
These people are going into business because, they want to work with
well, and there's a
kids.
lot of support for the existing providers, but not necessarily
For the new ones.
to get you from point A to point B. Once you are interested, we have resources that can support that development. But it's like, how do we get those people to know, to feel confident that I have this interest and I can do this, to get to us, you know what I mean? That's the gap.
So it's creating something to encourage that future development.
References. and-
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the car.
thank you, as always. Have a great Thanksgiving. See you soon, the toys. Okay.
Yeah, I already got a couple bags,
Awesome.
3 bags worth out in the shed.
We're trying to collect coats or money to buy coats so that we can couple of the toys with coats, because we've had a lot of requests. So, and I feel like kids can go without boots and go outside for recess, they can't go outside without a coat. So
I guess I'm just
trying to
Right.
collect coats. Yeah, we're collecting either new coats or money to buy coats, so that when what happens is he'll bring us all the toys, and then we have a day, they'll sort and pack everything, and then families come and pick up their toys. And so our thought is if we have coats out, then the families that are in need can get a coat or have some. So,
I got my weekly spot on the Hancock radio station tomorrow
Great.
morning. I will give a pitch for that.
okay,
And
great.
And
That would be awesome, yeah. Anything people can do. The only thing we ask is that they're new, because I don't want to have to mess with
no,
bugs or like cleaning
No.
them or anything like that, so.
exactly.
But
Shelley,
thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Shelley, say hi to your mom for me.
Nice to see you.
How are you?
Good.
We're busy as ever. I
Yeah.
think it's the name
Well,
Shelley.
I am the interim head start director since October at the moment too, so.
So here I am trying to fill Mary Rosenthal's
Yeah.
spot.
Is she retired now?
No,
Okay,
but she'd like to be.
okay,
Fortunately, she's deeply loyal
I know,
because we finally got a candidate
yeah.
that
Did it work
decided,
out?
you know what, this is what I want. There's a specific certification required in the past. We had a year to get it. Not anymore. Now we have to hire somebody with a certain type of
Oh,
certification
no.
to supervise that person and all the employees in
Oh,
the
no.
interim.
Oh, no.
It's not in the budget.
Oh, no. Well, I was wondering, because I saw that Cindy was retiring, so I wondered
They
if
have
Mary
no-
was. Yeah, well, I have Head Start candidates at least. So I won't have to be the Head Start director forever, but
There's others.
listen, it's a nice treat for a day to go see cute little 3 and 4-year-olds when their classroom. So
Shelley, before you go,
I know she offered to be the interim.
you know, I don't want to end your session here on a down note, but you know, you outlined some very specific needs. How in a county where the resident population is a large percentage of the resident population fall within your guidelines for assistance.
Or my guidelines for age.
Yeah,
Um,
well, between the Alice population and those under the poverty level, that's the majority of our population.
Right. And when so much of state, federal funding moves through county government now, that's just the model that's out there. How do you bring that real awareness? You know, you said a third of your board have to be made up of elected officials. But some of those same people who I know are on your board ignore those needs and spend $500,000 to refurbish a statue and spend another $265,000 to replace some bathrooms for a private entity. And yet we have such, you know, we have folks who may not have sufficient food during and as a result of COVID.
So how do we impact governmental priorities? I have a governmental priority that's a concern of mine, and that's that legislation necessary to make it easier for people who have been incarcerated to get out of that. You said, once they get out of that system, well, let me tell you, they keep them in that system for so long and they beat them down.
Yeah.
Well, we
They
can,
charge them. So now,
I do think that we have, and this is, we don't have to debate this today for people with different views, but I think we have a very huge problem at the government level, local, state, and federal. Our legislative priorities are all over the place. They're based on personal feelings in some cases. Who's gonna scratch your back if I scratch yours? And let's be honest, that's what happens here in Delaware County if we're
And
being
it's
blunt.
staying in power.
So I think. My agency isn't, if the county takes away our money tomorrow, we're not going anywhere. They're not our boss. And our job is to help, we have been charged with helping the people in need in this community, and we're gonna keep doing that. And we're gonna
The
keep,
money they get
we're
from the
gonna-
county, I wanna make this, is based on contracts the county chooses to purchase, because they need to get some things done.
Yeah.
They don't get any funding that comes to them from the county, am I right?
no, we do.
You get just generalized funding?
No, it's all tied to a, yes.
It's all tied
a
to
contract.
agreements that are in
So-
place.
I would say that I feel like we have a job to just keep working to try to get their buy-in and keep working around them if we can't get it. And there are people that do buy in at some levels to some of the things we're doing. I have a couple very supportive board members. But I think if we get lost in trying to convince them to buy in
As a body.
I don't know that politically our society is in a place where that's gonna happen. So our job is just to keep doing what we're doing, and I think the way we do that is we continue to sit at the table with like-minded people who want to be part of creating change in our community, and we just keep doing it. We just keep doing it, and we take the allies we have in the places we have them to leverage buy-in from other people. You know, I have a grant I just submitted, and I really needed a certain governmental department's sign off. And I couldn't get it, so I went to DSS and got it instead. So I think sometimes we just have to be creative and keep moving forward even when those barriers are in place.
And then you have a success and you can use that. And relationship wise, and I think this is important. You may have that supervisor who's always been distant on a certain topic, and then for whatever reason, suddenly they're ready to pay attention. You do something successful with that person. Now you have a success in the bank.
The best piece of advice I could give anybody for what it's worth, and you all probably already know this, but I knew who I wanted to be as a leader because I had a lot of terrible supervisors and leaders that I worked for. And I got so used to, I had this one supervisor in particular, her answer was always no. It didn't matter what you were asking, her answer was always no. And I got really skilled at, and I tell my staff this all the time, go into every conversation you have where you're asking someone something, thinking they're going to tell you no, so that you can come prepared to tell them why they should say yes, because that may be the only opportunity you get. And once they say no, the door is closed. So I go into every conversation almost prepared to make my sales pitch. And sometimes I don't need it. And sometimes they're like, Shelly, like I already was gonna say yes. But I go into every single conversation prepared for somebody to say no. And it's bought me far more yeses than I think it would have otherwise.
So what's in it for them?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that whatever that pitch is, has to speak to that, who that person is. But
You're awesome.
Shelly,
Yeah.
thank you.
Guys.
Maybe we need the other Shelly.
Gotta get in the show.
That's probably who she didn't get the sign off from. Tanya, would you turn the lights on?
Sure.
Silence. Where do you want to go?
Every
And
time
by
I
the way,
have
we
a
need more of you.
Every time I have a conversation with Shelly, I feel like I feel like crying afterwards. Because the needs are always so huge. Anyway,
And I feel different because I know she is relentless. Okay, she's relentless. And little by little, she's developing more and more and more long-term influence. Right, by recognizing her limitations. And that's part of our job. So you as leaders, first of all, if we don't take care of the weakest among us, who are we? That's that's who I am. And how we build them up helps contribute to our future. At the same time, we need to attract more of you. We need to do both. And if we can't do both, we have to do something. And you guys are the more fashionable ones. You're intelligent, you're smart, you already have a certain basis of success. Right? We need to use that to attract more of you. And Ray is absolutely right when he talks about the age It's driving me crazy.
When I talk about the what?
Age. We need to bring young people in. You know, we have to bring young people in. You all have passions. We talked about passions way back in the beginning, right? Raise asleep here.
No,
We
I'm
talked
not.
about passions. We need you guys to think about your passion and say, we want to try something. You might try it collectively, try it individually, but you gotta say, we want to try something. And part of me also thinks these guys need to meet Peg.
Well, I think there's several people, and I think, you know.
The more
there's-
I hear the questions they ask.
What are those, you know, we're scheduled to take a hiatus in classes
And move to individualized coaching.
for a period of time. But
I'm not sure we're ready.
I want to, I want to move you around. I want to get us going to different places, seeing different things, meeting different people. And you know, what are those places? What are those things you hear about?
For what? To achieve what goal? To see what's possible.
To understand the breadth of what's happening. You know, I think one of those places I would encourage would be Kirkside and the project that is under development at Kirkside.
Speaking of relentless.
Well, I'm not sure, you know, steady. I think the just because it seems unusual in a rural county. To have the cutting edge technology, if you will, that's an old technology of the compost and recycling facility. I just think it's a fascinating facility. I don't know as we need to see the county jail.
So enough of it.
What's that?
I've seen enough of it.
I
can
bet.
tell you.
Couple times.
And, you know, I don't think we need to see the. You know, and have the sheriff tell us about, you know, $1.63 that he spends on food for the inmates or whatever we call them. So I'm interested in knowing from you what those, you know, who are those, not so much who are the people, but, you know.
What more do you want to see and know?
The places. And you know, and I think there's probably during the winter months, it's obviously more difficult. But you know, this is, I'm torn on this. You know, I don't want us to, you know, Jordan, you work out in Sydney, you know, and as much of a success story Sydney is, I don't think we need to go to Sydney for the sake of, you know, well, here's Sydney. You know, you can do that on your own. You can, when the weather's a little bit more consistent and, you know, go and explore some places. But is there a value in seeing, as an example, seeing one of the BOCES centers? Is there a value in seeing, you know, we talked about, with Shelly, we talked about, you know, we talked about healthcare a little bit, but we talked about those assisted living in nursing homes and things like that. You know, I've been to the Delhi rehab facility so many times, I can probably give the tour. And it's interesting on one level, but you know, you're not gonna see anything you didn't expect to see.
What do you need? What do you want? What's your passion as a leader? I don't know why you're here. And I mean that in the nicest of ways. I don't know if your employer said, this is a good program, we participated in the past, we see you as a potential leader, we would like you to go. I don't know if you heard about it and you spoke to your employer and said, here's a program that interests me, or maybe it was hybrid. But when you came to the program, did you have something in mind? If you didn't, and you're here now, do you have something in mind now? Something you'd like to see be different? Because hearing that now is probably going to be different than hearing it in the very beginning, because you know more. That will drive who does your individual coaching, because when we take hiatus, we don't actually take hiatus. We help you work on some things that interest you. And maybe it's that you're not going to have a big project. You're just going to keep growing and learning. Maybe you guys are all going to go out in your communities and go get more information around these topics that we seem to have centralized on, and come back and report back via Zoom, and then later on back together. Maybe at the very end, we're going to have a big event that's a panel, and we go out and we get people to sponsor it, and we get people to send people, young people, that talks about being a young person in this county and how do we grow that and make it a richer experience for you. I don't know, but I do know that Ray and I both want to meet your needs, and we need to shut up and listen to what your needs are. Now, where are you? What is going through your mind? We don't know. What do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I mean, at least for me, as we know, I don't know much about Delaware County.
Yeah.
I grew up in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, still live in Wayne County. So for me, knowing how passionate I am to give back to my community, and my ultimate goal is to get other people to follow in the same mindset and the same footsteps. So to me, it's about making connections. I would like to meet, the heavy hitters in this area who I may not have a project or something specific in my mind at this moment, but I may possibly 3 months from now meet somebody who needs a connection. So for me, it's just getting as much outreach and knowing who has the same mindset already as me, and how I can interconnect and be part of the puzzle of the connecting piece when those things arise. Thinking about the project that we're doing, everything that we stated is so much needed, but we also need to look at the scalability, especially from, we're a group of 7-8 people. We need it to be practical about what we can accomplish. So, I had stated how my magic wand was to be creating a JCs, because I do believe I can round up quite a few individuals to, even if it's just to raise money and give back in a monetary way to the organizations like Sally, is part of, because that's still making a difference, even though I'm not,
creating a housing development or whatever it may be, it's still assisting areas that's needed.
Are there JCs in your area? What does that
I-
stand for again?
It used to be JCs is now just JCs. It used to be at one point Junior Chamber of Commerce.
Okay,
And you had to, once you got to 40, you were shown the door.
so I was a member of the JCs when I worked in our corporate office in Lonsdale.
Okay,
Once I relocated to Callicoon, I've kind of just stayed in that community. But to my knowledge, I don't know of any in Sullivan or Delaware County.
No, I don't.
I don't either. And
There used to be one up in Oneonta, but
I want to hear from everybody and look for the linkages. So I'm gonna make myself.
And I met Peggy, by the way, and I visited the Kirkside project. That's actually where we went after the chamber
Yeah.
breakfast. Amazing woman. Amazing project.
Visionary.
Mhm.
And it's important to recognize that Kirkside project is there and happening because a decade ago, there was a visionary town supervisor. And so that's where.
who became
It
a
takes
visionary
No, who became a visionary because he wasn't always.
because he was not.
He was always a good man, but he wasn't always a visionary. All right, what else? Who's gonna go next? Thank you, by the way, for speaking up.
I think from my perspective, I was born and raised here. I haven't lived anywhere else. And I don't necessarily want to live anywhere else. This is my home. So this program has actually. I went into it, my boss wanted me to take it.
Yeah.
And I was excited about it because. It's a cool new program. So I think in this program, I'm really gaining a lot from learning more about the town that I've always known. So I'm learning about this underlying world that's in my hometown. And just getting to know my hometown better. Which I really like, because I want to make this place better. I want it to be something that the high school students go, I can't wait to get out of this town. I want them to say, I could stay here forever. So when I think about my project, I don't have one firm in my mind. There's a lot out there. But I want it to be something where I can. I'm excited about this project that we're thinking about, maybe doing a connected professionals. And I think that'll be valuable. If it starts small enough that it can grow from there and not get too big too fast, I think.
Starts with one step, guys.
Yeah, the pilot, like Shelly was talking about, maybe.
Or maybe
some
just
kind of
gathering
that.
and say,
Maybe just.
here's an
casual
idea.
gathering. Yeah, just sharing ideas and staying connected between various businesses across this area. I think there's a lot of barriers that can be up between businesses. But I want whatever I do to be helpful to the community in a way that's approachable for everything. I think I'd like to be involved in a lot more voluntary programs and maybe starting one of those like that. In probably Walton, what I was thinking of was having a life skills workshops that we can hold in Walton, like for what Shelly was talking about, like helping people who don't know how to budget or meal plan, or not everyone knows how to change a tire, or what you do in an emergency situation. Kind of those things go through my mind because I think that could really help the community. And if you get experts to volunteer their time for one-day workshops where people can come and see those things done and do them themselves, I think that can have a really good ripple effect for your people, no matter where they are. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Caitlin, how do you leverage the Center for Student Engagement or whatever it's called this week?
I'm not part of that one. We connect up there a little bit. What's interesting about the college is they're trying to do what we're trying to do here on the college level. There's been a lot of they're trying to have more connectivity up there. I think a lot of people don't know what's going on in other departments other than their own. It's been very, the barriers were up.
The silence,
Forever.
that is a traditionally
Yeah.
incredibly siloed
Yeah.
place.
And.
Well, it
now
has
we're-
been especially so for the last 6 years.
Yes,
And Mary is,
she's doing. an
Conduit
amazing job.
is really taking those down.
Yeah, and we're at that,
Some of them
we're at
think
the
they're-
birth level of that, of trying to bridge those gaps between departments that have built up for years. And so we're in our own renaissance, hopefully, over there.
It's the
soon.
right way. Right.
Yeah. But I also want the project for me to be completely voluntary and free for people. That's hard, because you have to get volunteers, but that's my idea. I don't really want there to be any barriers other than finding out that it's happening and attending.
I hear I'm going to be, for my life here, a community builder.
Yes, I hope so.
That's what I hear. Who's next?
I'll go. I'm gonna echo a little bit of what I've heard already. I did not grow up here, but I'm relatively new. I've been here for a few years, but I'm obviously still young in my professional career. So it's helpful to meet other professionals and to like gain my own network versus what's just like inherited. I mean, we've all been there for like 30 years, so they know everybody.
Now, where are you? Right in the main?
Yeah, I'm in Sydney,
Okay.
At the Civic Center.
correct. But something that I would personally recommend is readdress our approach to gaining and retaining volunteers. Right now, our volunteer base is mostly people who are retired. And I know there's a lot of barriers for people who are working age, who have their own families to volunteer time. But I think there is a huge disconnect, kind of like Ray said earlier, like 17-year-olds don't want to hang out with 70-year-olds. A lot of the times 70-year-olds don't want to hang out with teenagers either. So I definitely think that there's room for improvement in the way that we're approaching our volunteer shortage. And I'm kind of the only one on the team to figure it out, so.
So would that also involve structuring how volunteers contribute differently? So right now, this is what was, it's
Right.
not working in some ways.
Right, so I think like a restructuring of how we are approaching our volunteer base, but also like getting a better understanding of like what younger demographics are looking for in volunteer opportunities and targeting that to get them involved and to get a wider selection of demographics than just like what we're seeing right now, because our current volunteer base, although they are dedicated, it's not sustainable.
Do you think that you're not seeing the volunteers that are outside of what you're used to seeing? Because that younger, that next generation don't feel included, weren't asked.
I think it's a combination of things. I think that like there, like others have said, there's a lack of connectivity between younger professionals and people who are younger but still in a position to contribute their time. So like they're, for some reason, our current marketing strategies aren't reaching them. I think it has to do with like a lot of the outreaches that we do to gain volunteers are like in the middle of the day at events like vendor fairs and information fairs and things like that, that a larger percentage of the people who are attending are available at that time during the day. So they're retired or they're.
So they're done at the convenience of staff as opposed to the convenience of the market that you want to reach.
Right.
Is that harsh?
It's not.
Okay, so the convenience of staff, but also what about those that are your target audience to be helped? When are they, what's their convenience?
The children and families that we service. I feel like a lot of the families that we service are in a similar boat to the markets that we're reaching. It's like they are, you know, unemployed or underemployed. So we have very little trouble getting mentees. A lot of our referrals come from like the county itself. So like we have an abundance of children on the waiting list and families to serve, but unfortunately we don't have the connections with the young professionals who can serve them as a
Do
volunteer.
you sometimes think you don't have the connections to the young professionals, or that there just aren't enough young professionals?
I think it's both.
Okay,
I
we need
also,
more people like you. I'm gonna say that every time.
I also think our society these days, a majority of it is the outlook is no longer about the bigger picture, but more about what's in it for me. You know.
That's a nice way to put it. I was gonna say.
We all just collectively do that.
I think all of you guys are really like me on this term called the greater good, Diane. It's in the DNA,
You know,
which is why you're sitting here, successful young professionals.
right.
It's all part of it.
That's what, you know, even something as small as looking at applicants to hire at the bank, you know, I try to find someone who truly cares, because that's not something that can be taught. You know, I can teach them all the job knowledge in the world. I can teach them how to be, you know, efficient and accurate with their day-to-day responsibilities. But we need people who truly care, you know, that can't be taught.
And how is that encouraged? Not your process. How, I mean,
Again, I make that very apparent.
but how do you encourage that someone to care other than it being embedded in their
I
DNA?
mean, I always express how a career with Wayne Bank, and not even specifically Wayne Bank, but
Sure,
it's all family oriented. Like, I don't have an I, a you, a me mindset. It's about the team and family.
right,
And the greater good of my career is gonna benefit everybody, you know, the progress of your career. Yes, it benefits you, you know, financially, whatever it may be, but it's benefiting the community in the long run. So I always try to stress that, again, the greater good. I don't know.
okay,
But it is hard, you know, it's again, not something you can really, you can preach it as much as you want, but not everybody's gonna have the same mindset or that thinking.
right. Beth, what's the passion?
I've been thinking about it a lot, honestly, for me. I feel like every time we get together, what I want to do changes.
You're not alone. It's okay.
Because I originally started my employers, they thought it would be a good choice, and I was very appreciative, and it's definitely helped me professionally, but also the more I think about it, I think even in my home life, which is how like the whole childcare thing came up, but it's like also it still relates professionally as well. But it's just one of those projects, as I said before, it's a little too big for my taste, I guess. But also like I didn't realize that, like what Shelly was saying, some of the programs that they have, and I've reached out to like Delaware Opportunities before. Like I said, my child went to Head Start and everything else, but like I didn't know about some of the programs that they had. So I don't know if it's maybe just getting it more knowledgeably out there for everybody to know. And I just don't know exactly where my project is gonna lead, honestly.
Well,
My
let me ask you a question. The conversations we've had, which I can tell cause you all to really, really dig in your brains, just by your faces. And unless you're falling asleep, and I don't think that's the case. How has that affected you in your workplace? Start there.
I haven't exactly like the 3-step thing with this is how I feel, everything else. Like I haven't really used it here, but I feel like some of my concepts, like my original magic wand was communication. And I realized it's not even just always on everyone else's part. Sometimes my communication could be better portrayed as well. So just small little steps like that have made an impact, I believe. And I think also getting those resources, like reaching out and getting to know certain people, like Ray has pointed me in the right direction of certain people to help professionally and also personally. So I think getting those contacts has been a huge help as well.
Okay. Contacts, heavy hitters, something that brings whatever young people are around together. And maybe it's something that brings young people who are here professionally together with some of the seniors at the college, right? So they know they have a potential friendship group if they stay here. So, you know, I'm hearing, you know, this is all creating pictures in my brain. And yeah, let's hear the rest of you and then.
So. I feel like I like what everybody's saying a lot. And I like the idea of a panel and creating community and spreading awareness of all of these subjects throughout the entire county. So you have that, this was my rough drawing on my paper, that main panel that takes those hot topics of discussion from everybody's plates and works on distributing and collecting and gathering information in those key people to get us, like, if you're all working on volunteers or education and training, and say January's education and training month or something, and they bring all those key players that have all that information and present in multiple locations that information to different not-for-profits, businesses, and say these are the people you connect for that. And this is that information, like just a group of people who gather that information and help disperse it, I guess. But that panel gets their suggestions and their information from a larger group. It can't just be them coming up with the subjects because it's just gonna be the same. They need a source. Stagnant. Yeah. That was just a thought.
Can you talk about, Cam, would you talk about, you mentioned, for lack of a better phrase, criminal justice before. Where's that passion in there?
Mine.
Yeah.
I think, well, I started, when I graduated college, I started working at a CAC,
At what?
a child advocacy center, like
Thank
we're
you.
doing
Okay.
in
Yeah.
Delaware County. And then from there back here and then worked for the sheriff's department for 5 years. So seeing,
Really?
yeah. So I worked as a legal advocate and
What years were those?
I was there under Tom
Okay,
Mills.
okay.
So until,
That's really what I was going at.
yeah, yeah. So different, yeah, a little different than it is now. So I guess I just see both sides of it. The people, like, as somebody in law enforcement, and then as somebody who's been in this system. So and
Perspective.
that's a hard perspective to have, and it's like some people can't see it that way. They see the kids who are in the system and the adults who are in the system and the people
outside of that too. So they're both hard. People can't come out of jail and always live a great life, no matter what they're in there for, and it's sad. I don't know, but there's education and training that can be met on different levels, and I think that they could be included on that.
And just to let everyone know, one of the topics that the county chamber is looking at, well, not looking at, that we will be rolling out sometime, I hope soon, is an effort to educate business owners about ideas like second chance hiring or fair chance hiring.
This is huge.
And from that will come something of a, and Cam, I'd love to get your ideas on this, you know, what are those perhaps legislative issues that need to be addressed? You know, as an example, apparently here in Delaware County, we have our folks have never issued a certificate of completion or satisfaction ever. So that prevents, I've talked with you about that, that has prevented some employers from hiring people.
Who are here, who are ready, who have done everything,
Qualified.
who have done everything. And by the way, this is not just here, because I have a nephew who's been through a bad experience in Arizona. And he's not anymore, but he was paying fees every month to meet with his probation officer. And the fees he was paying, even though he had gone and rose up in a business to the point where even with his record, nobody cared because he was so good at what he did. He was so good with people. And that was an unfortunate piece in his life. He's still under the thumb all these years later. It's insanity. All right, it's insanity. And that's a very worthy thing to take on. However, let's talk about the environment that we're taking it on within. We are in an environment of intolerance for anybody who's not me. For anybody who had an experience that they want to grow past. Because keeping the mayor means that I'm okay. Because it's the whole concept of, I first saw it in middle school. My candle will burn brighter if I blow yours out, right? And we collectively, I believe, and last year's class, maybe that's what we have to do. All right, get y'all together. Because I think we collectively have some power here to say, not in our Delaware County, not anymore. And become a group of institutions. I'm sitting here thinking about some of the things I remember from last year's Leaderful. Last year was the first year we shifted. We moved and called it Leaderful. But we've been Ray was graduating classes every year. Maybe we look back 5 years and we bring them all together.
Yeah.
Because the power of all of them sitting at a table means that some of these huge things might just get a little smaller. And remember, how do you eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? One more.
Yeah, so I first wrote down kind of asked like why the program. Kelsey told me I had to. No, so I work very closely with Matt Steen, who was in the program last year, and Kelsey came on board at MTC and started working on our team as she was in the
She
program.
was in the program and she was stolen. From
I was not part of anything. I came back from my paternity time and they said, look, Kelsey's here. I said, great. So I had nothing to do with it, but I'm very, very
It's
happy.
okay, she's great.
Yeah, great, absolutely fantastic, both of them. So then the opportunity came down to us at work and I said, do you want to? And I said, yeah, sure. And I think potential isn't necessarily a scary word, but the thought of potential changes as you get older, I think. Not that a clock is ticking, right? 'Cause I don't want to say that, but I think. that
Oh, no,
there's-
the clock is ticking.
There's always an opportunity. I think that you want to, strike when the iron's hot or move forward with a piece, and maybe sometimes you're limited in some of that. But that's something that I've always kind of thought of, okay, there's a lot of potential in this area, lifelong resident as well. I think I've stated that a couple times. I made a presentation at the school board for a new project we're working on with them, and Doris Warren looked at me and said, Mr. Johnson. And then I was like, okay, great. And they're like, oh, he's an alumni. Because it was like, it was just kind of cool to be in a different spot inside.
Now, what project is that?
Phone system, PA system upgrade,
Oh, please.
unified communication kind of,
Oh, please.
yeah, don't worry, we'll be there, yeah, so that was, and there's been a lot of opportunities I've had through MTC. I started at MTC and just needed a job. And my wife and I were trying to stay local, needed a job, got a job at MTC, said great, and I've led in different capacities in different spaces, but always kind of felt hitting a ceiling. So part of coming into this, I was like, I would really love to gain some tips and tricks, some things that I can help, advance some of the ideas that I know are true, either through college or going back and finishing my degree and all of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, right? All the practical book knowledge and then applying it on top of that. And kind of gain a space to say those things.
Mhm.
Because sometimes it's tough to say those things when you're, the kid that's lived here his entire life.
And
right?
so, real quick
Yeah.
piece, I don't think I've told you this. I told the women. So there was research way back when I was first thinking about going into administration on female administrators. Female administrators that came up within the system had to scratch and claw because it was not an easy time.
Yeah.
And there were another group of administrators that were female that had come up because they had proven themselves, moved to a new location and in a different job, proven themselves, moved to a new location, The way the two of them worked with young female administrators was very different. The one who had clawed and scratched made it more difficult for the young women, because I had to earn my stripes. The ones that had moved up through expertise, which is what you're working to do,
Right.
were far more effective at helping develop young female administrators. Okay, so coming up from within is a completely different experience. And I hear him saying, yes, I want the tricks, but I also want the expertise. I want the gravitas.
Right, and like, what's that connection? And it does, to your point, it feels like scratching and clawing sometimes. Just to
Absolutely.
have that. So, and part of that's, I put down to like, so there's like an internal skills piece, but then also like the networking and application piece in where I work now, because we have a lot of projects that we're working on. We've gone through restructures. I mentioned I've kind of worked in almost every department. So like, there's a lot of pieces there, and like how I can bring that together is.
Having worked in
there's
every
opportunity.
department gives you a value,
Yes, yep.
and you're
I-
trying to figure out how to max it out.
Right, and how do you do that? And I also wrote down, it's just nice to be in the room with like-minded people, if I can just say that, privately or not privately, it's not a big deal. But Cam and I were writing back like, that was just so great, I'm glad we're not alone.
Oh, that's a great,
I think there's part of that too, right? So,
and isolation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Isolation.
but as far as kind of building off of that, I do, there's an application in both work and then also some stuff that my wife and I do on the side, and some community pieces and church or fire department or just community outreach and all of these different pieces where there's a lot of needs in each one of those areas, right? And there's a lot of the same players in all of those areas, and there's a lot of just talking with Shelly today with Della, I'm like, yeah, no, I've got a list. You want a list?
Yeah,
And
by the way, in a rural community, you want networking, pay attention to the fire department.
yeah, I mean, it's there, and I just see that there's so much opportunity to what you were speaking of about. I've worked with local area youth in our area, kind of like as I was through college and was meeting with a bunch of them weekly and just chatting with them and being like, hey, you don't need to leave. You know, you can stay, just continue to work hard, go get your degree and then come back. Go and get skills because they're not here, and then bring those skills back and let's enrich the community. I don't do as much of that right now because a lot of them just aged out, which was great.
Oh, we'll find you more.
That's it. But to, I guess, go ahead.
I was just, what format did that take?
It was through our church.
Okay.
So
Okay,
my
good.
wife and I,
Great.
my wife and I were youth leaders there for 7-ish years.
Now, what
That's-
church is that?
Castle Christian Center.
And
what I
do they still have those kinds of things going?
We do in a smaller
Okay.
piece. Like I said, a lot of the kids all kind of aged out. We had,
And sure.
so it was my sister's class, more or less, that kind of age group. So they were 6-7 years younger than myself.
Okay,
So it was a nice age gap to
That's
talk about
great.
that
That's perfect.
kind of a connection, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
they kind of knew me as the older brother, but also
Right.
expected me to not go crazy. We would take them to conferences, we would have the people come in and chat, we would have outside people come in, so that was always kind of cool.
We
And
haven't
now
talked about churches.
all the kids are like my kids' age, or, much little, so we're talking under 10, probably is more of the population now, so we're looking at kids'
Good.
church and,
Let's start now.
giving them resources to just be like, hey, yeah, you can live here and you can have fun here and you can live life and have life. And I think that's something that I've looked into, like when I talk about internal skills for our company, for our MTC or how that applies. Kind of like freely I have, so freely I'll give to a point, you know what I mean? Like, hey, here's some skills, we can all do this. Like, it's not, it's rocket science, but it's not that rocket science, like,
It's been done.
right.
It's making that individual connection.
It's that connection, right? And I think sometimes I look more at a 10,000 foot level at the overall issue, and like, if we could ping, ping, ping and go. But sometimes that gets me a little bit more trouble because a few others of us end up on a couple different projects, which is fine and it's good. But
You
then it's
reward
also-
those who get it done by giving them more.
No, absolutely. And I'm cool with that, but I think sometimes the implementation piece is what I've seen has been a huge need in all of those areas, right? Like we have great ideas,
Absolutely.
but how are we going to do it?
Ideas are great.
Right, and it's getting those people around the table, it's getting people like us around the table and saying, okay, here are the needs, who can we connect? Right, to have Shelly talk to you, the hour she was here, and great, now we got an even larger list of things we can try to do, and I don't want to be like maybe captured in the moment a little bit after talking with her, but I think that there's so much opportunity throughout the county, and as one who has generations of my bloodline going back, it is kind of like, okay, yeah, no, now this is our place, this is what we have, so what can we do to make it better for everyone involved,
Interesting. Got anything to add there? Lady on the screen?
Not really at the moment, but I guess the one thing I will have to say is someone mentioned it earlier is that it was their hometown and they want to make people want to stay here. And so I moved around a lot as a kid. I lived in Georgia for a while, but I was born in Oneonta and my dad has lived in Downsville the majority of my life. But I mean, like I went to a school with a class of 500 and came back to Downsville and graduated with 27. And I love it here. And I want my kids to love it here and I want our family to stay here. So I do think trying to get more community involved and get the kids to want to stay here is a really big project that I think needs to be addressed, I think, because I think a lot of the kids now, every time I talk to them, they're like, I want to go. I want to get the heck out of here. It's too small. There's nothing to do, but there is things to do, and I just don't think they realize it.
You're gonna hear it a lot better from you guys
Yeah.
than they are from us.
And something that I really like about this is that it's fostering that team environment. I work very well on a team. I've always been on a team, whether it was sports or projects, primarily sports, but you know what I mean? Like there's always been a sense of team and like leaning on each other to get a job done.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you talk about Downsville 27, we had Margaretville and it was 32, I think, maybe. But you know what I mean? Like there was still just like a sense, in that sense of community, in that sense of team, you understood like, hey, you know, you may not always see eye to eye, but there's a group here that you're kind of running on and.
Your high school friends help raise you.
And
But
that's
I
the
think
thing.
that's the environment that we have here, right? And in that connection piece, I think we're talking about and showing those opportunities, whether it's in our workplace environment or into college age kids or high school age kids, or whatever that is, creating those empowerment groups or team like groups or opening people's mind to that as an opportunity where they're getting told, oh, well, you can do whatever you want. Yeah, you can do whatever you want, but you may not end up doing it well if you're trying to do it alone. You know what I mean? Like
That's right.
there's also a sense of just maybe a little bit of humility in that too, to be like, hey, you might not have it all, and that's okay.
Well, I think it's a dangerous, not dangerous. That's an intense word, but telling kids.
No, I
to
think
do-
you're very good. It's probably easier.
You can't. Let's get real.
You're gonna find out eventually. I might as well just give you a road sign quick that says, hey, there's a dead end right here, and the bridge isn't built all the way yet, right?
And like giving them the foundation that you don't have to find success by leaving where you grew up.
Mhm.
That idea that out there is more advanced, out there is better. If you go to a more developed state or somewhere else where you grew up, you're gonna find better success is a lie
Mhm.
that we all tend to believe when we're young, like.
You
that.
know.
And I think it's also lifestyle though, too, right? I think it's also lifestyle. 'Cause I remember my wife came out of a meeting once, when she was at the hospital and they were talking to someone that had no idea what was going on with the region. It was related to a grant thing and they were talking about the different areas. So she just took a map and she said, we're here and they're here and there's nothing here. And I'm like, whoa. People will just go there. There has to be people there. She's like, people drive an hour to go get groceries. They will drive an hour for another job. Like that's nothing new to us who have been here. But it's such a foreign concept to people who are outside.
You're
And
right.
as companies get larger and do more outsourcing, there's a representation level that sometimes gets missed in that.
That outsourcing is making me a lunatic.
And that it's so
Because it's
frustrating,
breaking
right?
down community in a horrific
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And we see less of that here. It's that those larger companies are doing that more and more.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that. Here's an example, Westchester Medical is struggling to get employees up here.
Yeah.
They're being
That may or
forced.
may not have been the entity my wife was working for.
Right?
And that may or may not have been the entity my wife.
No, I absolutely. That's what we got, and I'm new to the board,
Yeah.
because that hospital has to be there.
Yeah,
Healthcare has to be there. Primary care has to be there, and we have to be relentless. And you're gonna be hearing about it, but ultimately. They are paying twice as much to get temps.
well, then-
If we could help them get people who wanted to live here and they could hire them as employees. Everybody up there's stress level drops because there are enough people to do the work at hand.
At
Right?
least but at least they can get temps, they can get,
Oh, they can't get them all, but
is
we
it,
can't get any, because no one, it comes down to the housing issues. There's nowhere for the agencies for those
that's
people to
exactly
stay.
right.
So is it in that kind of situation, there's a representation piece from the community to be heard? But is it through a different style of a group that maybe where the board may not have the full representation? Or those kind of influential groups where there can be like a different type of group that can raise those concerns as well, or?
Well,
So-
part of the problem, I think, specific to
Not
what
not
Diane's
just
talking
to
about.
Westchester, but I'm saying. the
Well,
bigger
no,
picture of
but
people.
let's use Westchester as an example. and I think this is where Diane's frustration is evidence,
Yeah.
is that those decisions are being made in Valhalla, not in
Right,
Margaretville.
right. Yeah.
And, but-
And when
but-
they're recruiting professionals, they're acting like, well, we're recruiting them to Valhalla and sending them to Margaretville, and the spouse especially is like, what the,
Right.
you know, what do you?
Tell you. I will tell you right now, if we collectively did something to build a cadre of young professionals with a broad definition of what professional is. Professional gives back, right? Professional grows and improves, right? Professional listens to other professionals to learn. All right, professionals consider perspective, right? If we did that, we would help every single organization in this county. But I have to tell you, my head is exploding with the idea of sitting down with Ray and saying, I want to see the list of the last 5 years leadership Delaware graduates and go tap on their door and say, we want to do something big. This class wants to do something big. And we talk about that, we bring them to the table somehow to be determined. And we use that as a jumping board to say, this is our future. It's not my future. I'm gonna die here, hopefully not for a long time. But I need you to be supported so that we can step away and know that our future is in good hands and that the future of my 3 grandchildren who are being raised in Delaware County is in good hands. And it's just exploding because now I'm saying to myself, we got to build the cadre first. And then take some of these things and tease out who wants to do what. And part of it is continuing to build by reaching into our schools, reaching into our college. This has been a fabulous resource as long as it's been here. And Delhi is one of the best, even with the bumps that were in the road. Delhi has always done it better. They've always innovated. And within that, there have been people who never want to change anything. And they've always found a way around it. So I'm starting to get an idea that this class could collectively come up with something really cool and impactful as a class. And it involves maybe, as Ray said, seeing a little more, getting a little more heavy hitters in here like Peg. Maybe it involves, but I do know one thing. It is 10:04. And I'm saying to myself, and now I'm going to say out loud to all of you, we were ready to take a hiatus. I don't think we're ready. I think we need one more class to take this. You guys all have to leave here and say, I have to come back with ideas for how we pull this together. Some kind of a panel, some kind of a mid-spring gathering, some kind of a discussion that says, we want you back because we are the future of Delaware County. And you guys have to take this place by storm. And I think if we have one more class before our hiatus and we hear you come back, and maybe you absolutely leave us old farts behind and get online between now and then among yourselves and say, is it a panel? How do we pull in the young kids from the college? We need more of them. When I went to that birthday party, I talked to all the servers. They were delightful. And I said, what are you going to do? Well, I'm serving here tonight, but I'm not in hospitality. I'm in cybersecurity. I said, we need you here. Right. I had so much fun with that, inspired by you guys, by the way. And with everybody I met, I said, we need you to stay here. It's a very cool place to be. Well, I was surprised when I came here, Long Island, right? We can do it by saying, this is our Delaware County. We are making Delaware County's future. And I think you guys should be subversive and not even talk to us. But maybe 2 to 3 weeks from now, I think we should get together one more time. And you might have talked to each other, hint, hint, hint. And somebody has to be that one first email to each of you. You've got all your email addresses and the ones who aren't here today, who will be equally passionate with something like this. I'd like us to get together one more time and build this out. And then Ray and I can actually know what we're coaching. There, I got it out there. It was spinning in my head. Ray, what are you thinking? What do you guys think? Can we do that? Or don't we need to?
What do you think? 2 weeks from now would be December 6th. Tanya, can you make that work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Beth? You think you can make that work? Yeah. Even if it's, you know, somewhat abbreviated.
Let me ask one more question. Do we want 3 weeks? Look at your calendars. Do we want 3 weeks?
3 weeks is difficult.
Okay, all right. So if we come together one more time, and maybe it's from 2 to 4, not 1 to 4. Is that what you meant by abbreviated, Red? And, but you guys come armed. We get the list of past grads. You guys come armed with ideas for what we could do. And you know what? We know we've made the commitment. Remember the triangle. We're gonna let go of some of our ideas to make sure we come up with something collective that we can do. And then we'll know what we're coaching. What do you think? We good?
So let's say, let's say 2 o'clock on December 6th. I will send a Zoom link if that's easier, or we'll be here.
I'm gonna drive home in a really good mood again. You guys do that to me every time.
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
No, well, first I'm going to college.
Why
To
are you going
watch-
to college?
Well, there's a game.
Oh, okay.
And they started a little youth basketball thing this fall at the school.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to watch my rather gifted 7-year-old athlete and his big, not so gifted brother participate in the half.
Oh, that's awesome.
And one of them is the one that caused this. It comes in, who's also smart. He already knows he can be cross-country running like his daddy. Okay, so Leaderful. And Ray, let's you and I try to find a time to chat. Your
Yeah, my
head's spinning
schedule's-
too.
My schedule's less complicated than
I kind of have a blank check.
you let me know.
I'm very lucky. So,
Yeah. And Cam, I sent you that document. Take a look.
here's to whatever Thanksgiving is to you being what you need it to be. It's the way I always say it. Mine's chaos. Just fine.
Embrace it, right?
Your family around-
Embrace it, right?
Embrace it. 8 kids between the ages of 4 and 12.
Yep.
For the weekend. It's all good.
You're good.
Lots of too much food and
Oh, yeah.
send the kids upstairs and
High for breakfast, right?
Wear your stretching.
bye for breakfast and wear your stretching.
Always.
Stretching.
If you don't wear something tight for Thanksgiving.
It's a little weird for me now though, because I have a real job. So I actually had to go buy some like pants with zippers and buttons.
Oh, no.
Usually at this time of year with the mountain already open. Usually at this time of year, I have my wardrobe consists of fleece compression tights and base layers.
Yes,
From here,
ready for the mountain.
Till April.
Yes.
the little, look at. My husband went out opening day. This is the dream day. Go hunting in the morning. Go home, say what the heck. Run up to the mountain and get 3 runs in. Come home and say what the heck, go back out and hunt in the afternoon. I
He
said,
comes home with something.
he did, yeah, he didn't.
No.
But his 12-year-old grandson got his first deer in Michigan.
Oh, my gosh.
So he's on cloud 9.
That's-
So's Papa.
Beth, Shelly Bartow gave us copies of a child care resource and referral annual report. I will scan and get that over to you.
Thank you so much.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for encouraging it.
Anything else?
Thank you so much.
All right. Who else is gonna just eat themselves silly this weekend?
So much, it's gonna be disgusting.
Yeah, and you say pie, I mean pies, oh God.
Pies and leftover turkey sandwiches.
Oh my gosh, yes. You know, we cook